What if the most pivotal narrative ever recounted was conspicuously devoid of nearly 2 decades pertaining to its central figure's existence? The canonical Gospels, which meticulously chronicle numerous supernatural feats, profound homilies, acts of treachery, and the ultimate resurrection, maintain a remarkable reticence regarding the extensive periods spanning between Jesus' early childhood and the inception of his public ministry. This profound silence is so absolute that it appears to be a deliberate act, as though the very ink was intentionally withheld, or as if memory itself had been purposefully obscured. The New Testament only furnishes 2 brief glimpses into his formative years. Initially, there are the nativity accounts, where humble shepherds and celestial beings proclaim the arrival of the infant. Subsequently, there is one particularly vivid depiction at the age of 12, when Jesus is discovered within the sacred precincts of the temple in Jerusalem, engaging in discourse with a wisdom that utterly astounds the venerable elders present. Following this singular episode, the narrative simply dissipates into an unexplained void. The subsequent instance of his appearance places him at approximately 30 years of age, poised upon the riparian edges of the Jordan River, awaiting the ritualistic baptism administered by John the Baptist. 18 years, constituting nearly 2 full decades of a human lifespan, thus recede noiselessly into an unplumbed chasm. For any historical personality, such a lacuna would inherently be remarkable. However, for Jesus, whose life is widely believed to have fundamentally reconfigured entire civilizations, this silence transcends mere curiosity. It possesses an undeniably haunting quality. How could the crucial years marking the transition from boyhood into full manhood be entirely absent from the historical annals? Did no individual retain any recollections of this period? Did no one commit these events to written form? Or alternatively, were words indeed once inscribed, only to be subsequently lost to time or intentionally concealed? Some esteemed scholars posit that this omission is purely pragmatic, suggesting that the Gospel authors simply did not deem those particular years pertinent to their overarching theological objectives. Nevertheless, this absence does not register as an accidental oversight. Instead, it evokes the sensation of a pivotal page torn from a precious manuscript before it could ever be properly perused. The sheer magnitude of these unrecorded years, the profound shaping of a nascent soul, the gradual accumulation of knowledge, the meticulous honing of character, renders their absence profoundly significant, almost oppressively so. They stand metaphorically as a locked chamber within a familiar dwelling, its door perpetually visible, yet invariably sealed. One is compelled to contemplate the myriad experiences and developments those years must have encompassed. From the tumultuous period of adolescence into the responsibilities of adulthood, Jesus would undoubtedly have confronted the common tribulations of identity formation, familial obligations, and personal accountability. He might have diligently toiled within Joseph's carpentry workshop, skillfully shaping sturdy beams of cedar and resilient olive wood into functional yokes or sturdy tables. He might have traversed the sun-drenched, dusty hillsides of Galilee, keenly observing the cyclical rhythms of sowing and harvesting, gleaning profound insights from the natural world as much as from human interactions. He may have devoted himself to rigorous study within the local synagogue, diligently committing the Torah to memory and grappling with the austere yet poetic pronouncements of the ancient prophets. Yet the canonical Gospels, with their selective focus, glide over all these potential experiences in an unyielding silence. Consequently, the human imagination inevitably begins to permeate and fill this narrative vacuum. Precisely where the historical record ceases, apocryphal legends and speculative narratives begin to take root within that very silence. People have subsequently fabricated elaborate stories of distant pilgrimages, encounters with enigmatic teachers, and profound, hidden revelations. Over the course of centuries, these traditions have proliferated like tenacious vines, intricately weaving together elaborate tales designed to bridge the chasm deliberately left by scriptural omission. Some speculative accounts envision Jesus sequestered in the desolate wilderness, absorbing esoteric wisdom from ascetic sects such as the Essenes. Others transpose him to the ancient lands of the pharaohs, suggesting he imbibed knowledge from the profound and enduring memory of Egypt. Still other narratives transport him even further eastward, traversing formidable mountains and winding rivers into the very heart of India or even beyond, where he might have encountered venerable sages representing entirely different spiritual traditions. The pervasive absence of verifiable factual information thus becomes remarkably fertile ground for widespread speculation. And speculation, when reiterated with sufficient frequency and conviction, eventually crystallizes into its own unique form of tradition. During the medieval period in Europe, itinerant troubadours often recounted tales of Jesus embarking on journeys with various traders. In the remote Himalayan valleys, indigenous stories spoke of a saintly figure whose teachings bore striking resemblances to those attributed to Christ. In the British Isles, legends emerged concerning a young child who supposedly arrived with Joseph of Arimathea upon the misty, ancient shores of Glastonbury. All these disparate and often contradictory tales, despite their varied origins, nonetheless share one unsettling recognition: that there is an undeniable element of something missing. This sense of missingness is not merely a historical lacuna. It is profoundly existential. It compels us to ponder how much of any individual life ultimately remains unrecorded and unremembered. How many of our own personal chapters silently vanish into oblivion, recalled by no one but ourselves. The lost years of Jesus thus serve as a poignant mirror reflecting the lost years of humanity at large. The countless lives unnoted by formal chronicles, the unspoken seasons of profound personal growth that shape us in ways no historian can ever fully capture. However, the silence enveloping Jesus' unrecorded years feels far more profound than mere ordinary forgetfulness. It feels meticulously curated, deliberately chosen, and perhaps even sacred. Early Christian communities meticulously transmitted their Gospels with exceptional care, discerningly selecting and preserving only what they deemed absolutely essential to their faith. The fact that they left this significant gap entirely untouched strongly suggests a conscious choice, a decision that continues to resonate powerfully across millennia. Perhaps those specific years were perceived as too commonplace and mundane to warrant inclusion in Holy Writ. Perhaps they contained experiences deemed too complex, too potentially subversive, or too intricately intertwined with other non-Christian traditions. Or perhaps, most intriguingly of all, the very silence itself was intended to impart a profound lesson. That before divine revelation there must be a period of preparation, and before public ministry there lies an impenetrable mystery, a prolonged waiting, a hidden season, a transformative chrysalis within which something unseen and vital slowly takes shape. One might vividly imagine those 18 years as a twilight-shrouded road extending beyond the limits of human perception. Along its enigmatic path, any footsteps are faint, almost entirely erased by the relentless forces of wind and time. One can almost perceive them fading into the distant horizon. The prodigious boy who once astonished venerable elders progressively transforming into the man who would eventually astonish entire empires. The silence of those years is far from empty. Rather, it hums softly, like a string pulled taut, vibrating with a profound meaning that remains perpetually just beyond our immediate grasp. These vanishing years represent the very threshold of an enduring mystery. They serve as a powerful reminder that history, much like sacred scripture, frequently reveals its profound truths as much through what it deliberately withholds as through what it explicitly states. And so, we commence our inquiry not with the comforting certainty of knowledge, but with an encompassing silence, a silence that has persistently endured for 2 millennia, inviting us to lean in closer, to attentively listen for the profound wisdom that resides subtly between the lines. The Gospels are frequently regarded as the most meticulously preserved biographical accounts in all of human history. They profoundly shape the spiritual convictions of billions of individuals, their narratives retold within the hallowed confines of stone cathedrals, whispered in fervent prayers, vividly depicted in breathtaking frescoes, and carried into every conceivable corner of the terrestrial sphere. And yet, despite their extraordinary level of detail, they are undeniably incomplete. When one opens these sacred texts and endeavors to follow the narrative arc of Jesus' life, one inevitably finds oneself compelled to step across a vast, inexplicable canyon. On one side stands a child imbued with precocious wisdom. On the other, a fully grown man walking purposefully with his devoted disciples. The vital bridge connecting these 2 distinct shores is conspicuously absent. At the tender age of 12, the Gospels situate him within the bustling city of Jerusalem. The boy lingers attentively within the temple, engaging in profound discourse with the venerable elders, astonishing them with the depth of his understanding and insight. It is a compelling portrait of brilliance yet unripe, a promise still awaiting its full manifestation. And then, abruptly, the narrative curtain descends. The subsequent verse catapults the reader forward nearly 2 full decades. Jesus is no longer a mere boy, but a mature man of approximately 30 years, departing from the tranquil town of Nazareth to undergo baptism in the waters of the Jordan. In the vast expanse between these 2 moments, there is an absolute silence. No discernible voice, no recorded teaching, no movement across the sacred page. This profound silence has consistently troubled both devout believers and discerning historians alike. In the context of an ordinary human life, these would typically be the years of the most profound and transformative development. The child blossoms into the adult. Innocence gradually yields to the complexities of maturity. Enduring friendships are forged, while others may inevitably dissolve. Essential vocational skills are acquired. A definitive personal identity is painstakingly forged. To omit these crucial years from the story of any life would unequivocally feel incomplete. However, for the individual designated as the Messiah, this omission feels monumental, akin to entire chapters being torn from a book just prior to its climactic conclusion. The Gospels themselves offer no explicit explanation for this glaring omission. They gracefully glide over the narrative gap without any hint of apology, as though the very silence itself were deemed sufficient. Some scholars contend that this reflects the deliberate intention of the original authors. Their primary objective was not to furnish a comprehensive biography, but rather to present faith narratives meticulously crafted to proclaim Jesus as the Christ, rather than to satisfy mere historical curiosity. Within that specific theological framework, the hidden years were considered inconsequential. What truly mattered were the miracles, the ultimate sacrifice of death, and the triumphant resurrection. The entirety of the intervening period could therefore remain untold. And yet, paradoxically, the untold often resonates with the most profound impact. The very act of omission powerfully ignites the human imagination. Why was this significant space left so conspicuously blank? Was it because those years were perceived as too mundane, too ordinary to merit the inscription of ink, filled merely with the ubiquitous sawdust and honest sweat from a carpenter's humble bench? Or was it, perhaps, because they contained something far more disruptive, something too strange or potentially controversial to be meticulously preserved? In the centuries that followed, generations of believers profoundly yearned to know more about this enigmatic period. Early church fathers, authors of apocryphal texts, and wandering storytellers all attempted to mend the fabric of this pervasive silence. Some accounts asserted that Jesus never actually left Galilee, living a quiet, unassuming life until the commencement of his divine mission. Others, adopting a more daring and imaginative approach, transported him into desolate deserts and across vast oceans, placing him in direct contact with ancient wisdom traditions, far removed from his Judean homeland. Each of these earnest attempts was not solely about filling the narrative void, but also about addressing a much deeper, more fundamental question. What precisely made Jesus so uniquely different? From where did his unparalleled knowledge originate? How did he manage to speak with such an extraordinary, inherent authority? How did his parables carry such profound echoes of cultures extending far beyond the familiar confines of Judea? The empty pages of the Gospels thus transformed into a kind of reflective mirror. Each successive generation gazed into their blankness and invariably saw its own reflection, shaping legends and traditions to align with its deepest fears, its most cherished hopes, and its persistent longing for ultimate explanation. For mystics and esoteric thinkers, the narrative gap suggested a period of hidden initiation, years of intensive spiritual training that transpired beyond the scrutinizing gaze of conventional history. For skeptics, it hinted at the processes of myth-making, an initially ordinary youth subsequently transformed and embellished by evolving oral tradition and narrative embellishment. For those occupying the nuanced space in between, it remained an enduring mystery, one that invited profound wonder and contemplation rather than definitive, conclusive answers. It is undeniably tempting to envision those lost years as a kind of secret book, perhaps once meticulously written but subsequently erased from existence. Perhaps fragile scrolls once existed, delicate parchment that eventually crumbled into irretrievable dust. Perhaps vivid memories persisted within vibrant oral traditions, but were ultimately silenced by the relentless, erosive passage of time. Or perhaps, most haunting and compelling of all, the very blankness itself was a deliberate act, not an accidental loss, but a purposeful veil, a chosen silence specifically intended to safeguard something that was not yet ready, or perhaps never meant, to be fully revealed. One might envision the Gospels as ancient manuscripts from which crucial pages have been deliberately removed or simply never penned. As one holds these venerable texts, a palpable void is felt between the delicate sheets of parchment, an emptiness as profound and resonant as the very words inscribed. The complete narrative seems to hover just beyond intellectual grasp, prompting an enduring contemplation. Were these pivotal pages ever committed to writing, or was the very absence, the profound silence, intended to be a central part of the unfolding story all along? In this fascinating manner, the Gospels present a compelling paradox. They boldly announce moments of divine revelation, yet meticulously withhold a wealth of specific details. They impart timeless, eternal truths, yet conspicuously omit significant periods of human existence. They bring humanity into direct confrontation with a benevolent Savior, yet artfully obscure the arduous journey he undertook to achieve his transcendent identity. Within these enigmatic, unwritten pages resides a potent blend of both deep intellectual frustration and an irresistible, magnetic fascination. The profound silence embedded within the Gospels serves as a potent reminder that the tapestry of history is rarely, if ever, complete. It is meticulously pieced together from disparate fragments, intricately woven with threads that are frequently missing from the overall design. The blank, unadorned spaces within these sacred narratives are not mere oversights. Rather, they function as profound invitations. They beckon the reader to engage in imaginative contemplation, to listen with heightened attentiveness, and to embrace the fundamental understanding that mystery is an intrinsic and indispensable component of truth itself. One could reasonably perceive those 18 unrecorded years as an extended interlude within a grand narrative, a deliberate hush designed to prepare the listener's ear for the momentous events that are destined to follow. Much like a breath held in anticipation just before a powerful song begins, or the profound darkness that precedes the luminous break of dawn, the silence itself functions as a profound prelude. Perhaps this is the very reason the Gospels chose not to chronicle those years. Perhaps their intention was for us to lean in more closely, to intuitively sense that behind those seemingly empty pages lies not an absence of meaning, but rather an abundance of everything. The gradual, concealed maturation of the individual who would ultimately transform the entire world. When the canonical Gospels, which form the bedrock of Christian scripture, deliberately cease their narrative, other distinct voices begin to emerge and stir within the periphery of historical discourse. These are the apocryphal texts, a diverse collection of writings that were ultimately excluded from the official canon, sometimes summarily dismissed as heretical, occasionally revered in clandestine circles, and frequently consigned to oblivion amidst the accumulated dust of ancient monasteries. They represent scattered fragments of collective memory, faint whispers of alternative spiritual traditions, and subtle echoes of lives lived just beyond the rigid confines of established orthodoxy. And within the rich tapestry of these texts, the profound silence surrounding Jesus' unrecorded years begins to resonate with a compelling hum of untapped possibility. Among the earliest and most intriguing of these non-canonical works is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which should not be confused with the more widely recognized Gospel of Thomas. This particular text was likely composed in the 2nd century and endeavors to bridge the significant narrative chasm between the 12-year-old Jesus depicted in the temple and the adult man who encounters John at the River Jordan. In its pages, the youthful Jesus is portrayed not merely as intellectually precocious, but as possessing formidable, even dangerous, divine power. He is depicted forming birds from mere clay and miraculously imbuing them with the breath of life, causing them to take flight. He also strikes down those who provoke his ire, only to later heal the very individuals he has harmed, showcasing a volatile mix of divine authority and human temperament. The narratives within this infancy gospel are undeniably peculiar, at times even disquieting, painting a vivid portrait of a child who is simultaneously divine and inherently perilous. Although ultimately excluded from the official scriptural canon, this text nonetheless reveals a profoundly telling insight. Even in the nascent centuries of Christianity, adherents found the extensive silence surrounding Jesus' youth unbearable. They harbored an intense yearning to comprehend the events of those missing years, and consequently, they filled this narrative void with an array of stories that dramatically oscillated between awe-inspiring miracle and fantastical myth. The Gospel of the Hebrews, a significant text now largely lost to history, save for a scattering of preserved quotations, also offers a tantalizing, albeit fragmented, glimpse into this period. Preserved through excerpts cited by prominent early church fathers, this gospel appears to depict Jesus engaging in discourses that underscore wisdom acquired through experience, journeys undertaken to distant lands, and esoteric secrets learned beyond the circumscribed framework of the canonical narratives. Some of its subtle echoes suggest a potential influence from Jewish mysticism and even elements of Eastern philosophies, as if the original author had encountered whispers of Jesus' travels extending far beyond the familiar borders of Judea. Then there is the renowned Gospel of Thomas, an extraordinary collection of enigmatic sayings attributed to Jesus, famously discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi in Egypt. This text contains no traditional narrative structure, no accounts of miracles, and no description of the crucifixion. It is comprised solely of words, aphoristic, profound, and often perplexing. Yet some of these sayings possess an ancient primal quality, feeling more elemental and unadorned than the meticulously polished parables found in Matthew or Luke. They speak of concealed knowledge, of the kingdom of God residing both within and all around, and of self-discovery as the definitive path to enlightenment. Did these profound words echo teachings absorbed during those undocumented years, or do they represent a parallel stream of early Christian memory, a distinct tradition that developed independently? Scholars engage in endless debate, but the profound mystery persists. The apocryphal tradition, a rich and diverse body of literature, did not conclude with these Gospels alone. The early centuries of Christianity gave birth to dozens of additional writings: the Gospel of Mary, the Acts of Thomas, the Gospel of the Ebionites, and a multitude of others. Some of these texts presented Jesus within entirely unfamiliar contexts. Others subtly hinted at extensive travels far beyond the familiar geographical boundaries of Palestine. In the Acts of Thomas, for instance, the Apostle Thomas is famously depicted journeying to India, where he disseminates teachings that bear a striking, almost uncanny resemblance to those of his master. Could this narrative be a faint trace of an even older tradition, suggesting that Jesus himself, during his hidden years, had already embarked on an eastward pilgrimage, sowing spiritual seeds that his devoted disciple would later cultivate? Even within the venerable Jewish and rich Islamic traditions, The pervasive silence of the canonical Gospels regarding Jesus' early life was not left entirely unaddressed. Medieval Jewish writings occasionally delved into speculations concerning Jesus' youth, sometimes portraying him as a diligent student of mystical arts, and at other times as a controversial figure who ventured too deeply into forbidden wisdom. In Islamic lore, the sacred Quran offers intriguing glimpses of a youthful Jesus who miraculously speaks from the cradle and performs divine signs even as an infant. These narratives echoing apocryphal stories that had traversed centuries and diverse lands, demonstrating a shared human impulse to fill the narrative gaps. All these disparate writings, though often scattered, contradictory, and historically unverified, share a singular and curious characteristic. Their very existence is a direct response to the powerful demand for narrative fulfillment posed by silence. The pervasive blankness within the canonical Gospels acted like a powerful magnet, irresistibly drawing to itself a rich tapestry of legends, imaginative speculations, and fervent spiritual dreams. Each nascent community, finding the extensive absence of information intolerable, meticulously wove its own intricate narrative tapestry to cover the perceived gap. And yet, if one approaches these apocryphal texts not as literal historical accounts, but rather as profound windows into humanity's deepest yearnings, they become extraordinarily revealing. They eloquently demonstrate that from the earliest centuries, the faithful were profoundly haunted by the persistent question of Jesus' lost years. They found it difficult to accept that the man who articulated such universal wisdom could have lived an entirely ordinary youth in complete obscurity. They intuitively sensed that the extensive silence must inevitably conceal something far greater. Transformative journeys, rigorous studies, and profound revelations that meticulously prepared him for the extraordinary, world-altering path that lay ahead. One might vividly imagine a diligent scribe, working in the flickering, uncertain light of a monastic cell, his quill scratching softly across a fresh piece of parchment. He inscribes words that resonate with profound truth, not history, but longing. His literary endeavor is an earnest attempt to capture fleeting shadows, to imbue the pervasive silence with tangible form and meaning. He cannot definitively prove where Jesus walked, but he possesses the profound capacity to imagine it. And in that very act of imaginative creation, he meticulously preserves for future generations a poignant record, not merely of historical events, but of the enduring human need to fill the void of the unknown. The apocryphal texts persist, much like the scattered fragments of a long-forgotten melody. They are inherently incomplete, frequently discordant, and sometimes jarringly out of tune with established harmonies. Yet, they serve as a potent reminder that silence, by its very nature, never truly remains empty. Stories, legends, and imaginative narratives invariably rush in to fill it, carrying with them the faint echoes of untold paths and unrecorded experiences. Whether these echoes represent genuine historical truth or merely whispered legends, they nonetheless reach us across the vast expanse of time, as soft and ethereal as fading footsteps receding down a long, dimly lit corridor. These apocryphal fragments compellingly remind us that history itself is frequently composed of whispers, that what is deliberately excluded can be as profoundly revealing as what is explicitly included, and that in the deep shadows cast by the Gospel's empty pages, numerous voices still softly murmur, persistently calling us to ponder the enigmatic question of where Jesus walked during those 18 hidden years. Among the myriad theories that emerge to address the profound silence surrounding Jesus' hidden years, few possess the enduring persistence and allure as the suggestion that he spent a significant period among the Essenes. This enigmatic Jewish sect inhabited the stark, arid deserts near the Dead Sea, their austere lives meticulously carved into the rugged stone cliffs, and their sacred scrolls carefully sealed within clay jars. To some contemporary observers, they were perceived as fanatical devotees obsessed with ritual purity. To others, they were revered as profound mystics, entrusted with safeguarding esoteric secrets deemed too fragile and profound for the comprehension of the ordinary world. The Essenes remain a tantalizing enigma even in the present day. The majority of our knowledge about them stems from the accounts of ancient chroniclers such as Josephus, Philo, and Pliny the Elder, supplemented more recently by the invaluable Dead Sea Scrolls, which were miraculously discovered in the caves of Qumran in the mid-20th century. These ancient scrolls meticulously describe a community that deliberately set itself apart, rejecting what they perceived as the corruption of the Jerusalem temple, fervently awaiting the world's imminent end, and practicing rigorous self-discipline, ritual bathing, and communal sacred meals. Their extensive writings are replete with vivid visions of light and darkness, depicting cosmic battles between the sons of righteousness and the sons of evil. They lived with an intense conviction that the world stood perpetually on the precipice of a momentous divine revelation. Within this austere, profound desert silence, some envision a young Jesus walking among these devoted individuals. The parallels are undeniably compelling and tempting to explore. The Essenes practiced ritual baptism in flowing water, a practice remarkably similar to John the Baptist's purifying ritual in the Jordan. They shared communal meals of bread and wine, symbolic elements that would later acquire profound cosmic significance within Christian liturgy. They spoke fervently of a forthcoming teacher of righteousness who would guide the faithful through the cataclysmic last days, a figure hauntingly similar to the pivotal role Jesus would ultimately embrace. The desert, with its profound stillness and expansive, unbroken horizons, is precisely the kind of environment where deep spiritual transformation can take root and flourish. It inexorably strips away all comfort and worldly distraction, leaving only the raw essence of spirit and bone. If Jesus truly sought solitude, if he earnestly sought out teachers who lived lives of radical devotion, there were few places more perfectly suited than the secluded caves of Qumran. Some scholars even propose that John the Baptist himself was significantly shaped by Essenes influence, his fervent wilderness cry echoing their apocalyptic urgency and fervor. If John had deep roots within this community, might not Jesus have trodden a similar path? And yet, despite these compelling correlations, definitive proof remains elusive. The canonical Gospels, the foundational texts of Christianity, do not explicitly mention the Essenes by name, although they frequently refer to the Pharisees and Sadducees. Perhaps this very silence is itself telling, an absence that conceals a connection deemed either too intimate or too uncomfortable for explicit acknowledgement. Or perhaps it is merely a profound coincidence that their teachings resonate so deeply with what would later emerge in Jesus' transformative ministry. The tantalizing possibility, however, continues to captivate and intrigue. The prospect of such a connection continues to captivate and intrigue many. It is quite conceivable to envision him adorned in the pristine white garments characteristic of the Essene community, participating in their sacred ablutions within the shadow of towering desert escarpments. One might picture him intoning ancient hymns beneath the vast, star-studded firmament, or listening intently to the revered scrolls being chanted by the flickering glow of torchlight. Furthermore, the rigorous regimen of their daily existence comes readily to mind. The solemn prayers at dawn, the communal breaking of bread, extended periods dedicated to scholarly pursuits, and an unwavering vigilance for portents signaling the world's culmination. It becomes readily apparent how such an ordered and devout cadence of life could indelibly impress itself upon a young individual earnestly seeking spiritual enlightenment. Should Jesus indeed have spent a period residing amidst the Essenes, the profound influence he absorbed from them might have manifested less as a specific set of theological tenets and more as an ingrained, profound sense of self-discipline. The profound quietude, the intense concentration, and the unblemished singularity of their mission. These inherent characteristics resonate powerfully throughout his subsequent public ministry. They appear not as rigid, prescriptive regulations, but rather as an intrinsic fortitude, an acute perceptiveness that empowered him to transcend conventional customs and articulate his message with unparalleled conviction. While his contemporaries adhered rigidly to established ceremonial practices, he fundamentally reconfigured and imbued them with new significance. Whereas others passively awaited the advent of the eschatological conclusion, he boldly declared the imminent arrival of a divine dominion already manifesting within the contemporary world. The Essenes, for their part, regarded themselves as the diligent custodians of a concealed sacred pact, a select vestige destined for preservation until the ultimate epoch. Within the figure of Jesus, certain interpreters discern the realization of that very vision, not through withdrawal and seclusion, but through inclusive acceptance and broad engagement. Emerging from the desolate wilderness, he ventured forth into the bustling hamlets and towns, possibly bearing with him the fervent zeal characteristic of Essene piety, yet subtly transforming it into boundless compassion, miraculous healing, and an expansive, welcoming outreach. The contemplation that he might have indeed journeyed within their midst transcends mere academic speculation or historical intrigue. It serves as a potent reaffirmation that profound sagacity frequently germinates in obscure, sequestered locales. It further suggests that the tranquil stillness of the desert expanses, much like the unspoken depths embedded within sacred texts, can safeguard invaluable insights and revelations, often imperceptible to those who hasten past without due contemplation. One's imagination might readily conjure vivid images of the Qumran caves. The rugged cliffs ascend in stark, pale relief against a blazing, incandescent sky. The vast expanse of the Dead Sea stretches out in the distance, its surface unmoving as a polished looking glass, dense with its characteristic saline concentration. A youthful individual traverses the winding, constricted pathways, sacred parchments carefully secured beneath his arm, his leather sandals thoroughly encrusted with fine desert dust. He halts momentarily at the brink of the water, descends into the refreshing, cool current, and then emerges, water streaming from his form, his eyes serenely closed, his countenance uplifted towards the radiant sun. No extant historical document definitively chronicles this specific tableau, nor does any canonical gospel account explicitly safeguard such a scene. Nevertheless, across the span of countless generations, this evocative image persists within the collective human imagination, a subtle murmur of the Essene presence, reverberating softly through the enigmatic, unrecorded epic of Jesus' formative years. As the profound lacuna of Jesus' early life unfolds before our contemplative gaze, a venerable and enduring tradition posits his youthful peregrinations not amidst the familiar verdant hills of Galilee, but rather along the ancient, life-giving embankments of the majestic Nile River. Egypt, that venerable realm of ancient pharaohs and monumental pyramids, had historically served as a sanctuary and haven for the descendants of Israel throughout various epochs. The patriarch Abraham himself had traversed its arid expanses. Joseph, a pivotal figure, had ascended to a position of considerable authority within its royal courts. Moses, the great liberator, had famously guided his people from the clutches of its oppressive servitude. And, as recounted in the Gospel of Matthew, Joseph and Mary had once sought asylum within its borders, conveying the infant Jesus there to escape the murderous fury of King Herod. Consequently, if his very nascent childhood was indeed touched by the looming presence of the Nile's enduring legacy, is it not then plausible that his subsequent, undocumented years might have similarly led him to revisit that self-same, historically significant land? The Egypt of the 1st century CE was far more than merely a vestige of its pharaonic past. It stood as a veritable nexus where diverse currents of philosophical and spiritual wisdom converged. Alexandria, the magnificent metropolis situated strategically at the mouth of the Nile, radiated brilliantly as a preeminent hub of intellectual inquiry and profound scholarship. Its renowned libraries, though having experienced some decline from their fabled zenith, nevertheless continued to safeguard invaluable parchments and codices originating from Greece, Babylon, the distant lands of India, and numerous other regions across the ancient world. Jewish savants also congregated in this vibrant center, undertaking the monumental task of rendering the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, a seminal translation known to posterity as the Septuagint. Consequently, philosophy, esoteric mysticism, advanced medical practices, and celestial astronomy all intertwined harmoniously within the dynamic fabric of this truly cosmopolitan urban environment. For any young aspirant fervently yearning for enlightenment and profound understanding, Alexandria undeniably represented a singular locale where the collective sagacity of the entire world seamlessly coalesced. A persistent, venerable tradition quietly suggests that Jesus might have traversed those elegant marble colonnades, absorbing the eloquent discourses of distinguished philosophers, attending animated intellectual debates within resonant courtyards, and observing the solemn ministrations of the priests of Isis and Osiris as they enacted ancient rituals imbued with millennia of esoteric enigma. The striking correspondences between ancient Egyptian spiritual insights and the subsequent iconography and theological concepts of Christianity are remarkably pronounced. Fundamental concepts such as death and resurrection, divine judgment, and the promise of everlasting existence, alongside the ultimate victory of illuminating radiance over encroaching gloom. These were profound thematic threads intricately integrated within Egyptian religious frameworks for centuries prior to their articulation in Christian homilies. While positing a direct historical influence might be considered an audacious assertion, to disavow the unmistakable thematic resonance between these traditions would be an untenable position. Furthermore, There exist more subdued yet equally persistent oral traditions preserved by the Coptic Christian communities within Egypt, which contend that Jesus indeed resided among them for a period. Certain adherents highlight the profound wisdom embedded in monastic aphorisms and the ascetical practices of desert spirituality as faint yet discernible reverberations of his undisclosed sojourn along the Nile's banks. Other narratives recount clandestine academies dedicated to the art of healing, where botanical remedies, incantations, and sanctified unguents were meticulously employed. These accounts perhaps offer tantalizing echoes of the miraculous therapeutic faculty that Jesus later so powerfully demonstrated. Let us vividly envision the youthful artisan traversing the majestic thoroughfares of Alexandria, his cloak gently stirred by the refreshing Mediterranean breeze. The bustling harbor teems with vessels arriving from distant India and imperial Rome, their vibrant sails gleaming brightly against the expansive horizon. Within the city's numerous temples, fragrant incense tendrils gracefully ascend towards deities meticulously sculpted from stone. Concurrently, in its esteemed lecture halls, erudite scholars meticulously delineate stellar configurations and engage in profound discourse concerning the imperceptible, inherent equilibrium of the universe. In the local synagogue, sacred Torah scrolls are sonorously recited in both Hebrew and Greek, their resonant voices effectively intertwining two distinct cultural legacies into a singular spiritual tapestry. It is within this crucible of diverse knowledge, some theorists contend, that Jesus might have assimilated the extensive spectrum of sagacity that subsequently enabled him to articulate a message transcending cultural boundaries, thereby forging connections between both Jew and Gentile. Notwithstanding these compelling conjectures, if such extensive travels indeed transpired, they conspicuously left no discernible imprint within the official canonical scriptures. This omission may have been a calculated decision. The nascent Christian church might have harbored reservations regarding any associations that implied its revered Savior derived profound insights from sources external to the sacred covenant of Israel. To establish a connection between him and Egypt, a territory frequently depicted in scriptural narratives as a domain of subjugation and banishment, would undoubtedly have proven profoundly disquieting. It was arguably deemed preferable to maintain silence concerning these formative years, rather than to intimate that the Messiah's illuminating spiritual radiance was ignited by the glow of foreign luminaries. Nevertheless, the evocative image of Egypt continues to hold a potent sway within the realm of human imagination. The colossal pyramids already towered as venerable relics, their immense, intricately placed stones bearing silent testimony to civilizations that had long since receded into antiquity. The mighty Nile River continued its age-old cycle, swelling and receding in harmony with the immutable cadence of temporal progression. And within that enigmatic land, steeped in historical shadows, profound wisdom was meticulously safeguarded, much like precious grain meticulously stored within a hermetically sealed granary, patiently awaiting the arrival of those earnest souls who actively pursued its acquisition. Allow your mind to vividly conjure the image of Jesus positioned at dusk upon the verdant banks of the river. The tranquil water shimmers softly, reflecting the diminishing ambient light. Slender papyrus reeds undulate gently in the caressing breeze, and the melancholic cry of remote avian life drifts languidly across the atmospheric expanse. In the far-off distance, magnificent temples ascend majestically against the horizon, their intricately carved hieroglyphs narrating sagas more ancient than the earliest human recollections. A young man contemplatively surveys this panoramic vista, assimilating profound mysteries, acquiring fundamental truths that transcend mere textual inscription, and meticulously preparing for a momentous spiritual undertaking destined one day to extend far beyond the geographical confines of Galilee. Oh no. Irrespective of whether historical evidence ultimately corroborates these fascinating theories, the notion persists as a radiant and captivating possibility. That the unchronicled years of Jesus' life might indeed have been dedicated to traversing the enigmatic landscapes of ancient Egypt, a place where the accumulated sagacity of countless eras lay dormant, akin to a concealed seed, poised to blossom forth when the opportune moment arrived. Should the imaginative faculty propel one's contemplation of Jesus' peregrinations beyond the confines of Egypt, it swiftly envisages him pursuing the grand arteries of commerce that intricately interconnected the diverse regions of the ancient world. These were the legendary thoroughfares collectively recognized as the Silk Road, an expansive and intricate labyrinth of passages extending from the sun-drenched littoral of the Mediterranean, traversing through the ancient dominion of Persia, ascending across the formidable mountain ranges of Central Asia, and penetrating deep into the very core of India and China. Along these arduous routes, caravans progressed with deliberate yet unceasing momentum, laden with precious commodities such as exquisite silk, aromatic spices, and dazzling gemstones. However, their cargo encompassed far more than mere material wealth. They also transported profound ideas, captivating narratives, and diverse spiritual doctrines, quietly disseminated from one flickering campfire to the next, much like incandescent sparks momentarily igniting the encroaching darkness of the night. Certain venerable traditions intimate that during his undisclosed formative period, Jesus might have journeyed along these very same ancient pathways, presenting himself as an earnest seeker amidst a diverse confluence of itinerant merchants and profound mystics. The intrinsic appeal of such a proposition is utterly undeniable. The Silk Road functioned less as a solitary, monolithic thoroughfare and more as an intricate, dynamic tapestry woven from myriad cultural intersections. Within the slow-moving caravans traversing its expanse, it was entirely plausible for the sophisticated tenets of Greek philosophy to encounter and engage with profound Hindu teachings, and for the dualistic perspectives of Persian cosmology to intermingle with the serene practices of Buddhist meditation. It thereby served as a vital conduit of exchange, not merely for the material riches and quantifiable assets of various nations, but equally for the invaluable ethereal treasury of human intellect and spiritual contemplation. Ancient legends originating from India contained faint allusions to a revered, saintly individual identified as Isa, who is reputed to have journeyed from the Western lands to undertake studies within their spiritual traditions. In the latter half of the 19th century, a Russian explorer named Nicholas Notovich asserted that he had unearthed a manuscript within a secluded Himalayan monastery, which purportedly chronicled the biography of Saint Isa, a young man who purportedly departed from Israel and embarked upon an extensive sojourn into India, where he reportedly assimilated profound knowledge from both Brahmins and Buddhists before ultimately returning to his homeland. While academic experts vigorously dispute the veracity of Notovich's narrative, with the majority dismissing it as an elaborate fabrication, the compelling tale nevertheless continues to resonate. This enduring appeal stems from its profound connection to a deep-seated human desire to elucidate the inherently universal nature of Jesus's profound sagacity. The perceived congruities are undeniably evocative. Buddhist scriptures eloquently expounded upon the virtues of boundless compassion, the imperative of relinquishing attachment to transient worldly desires, and the fundamental necessity of extending benevolent care to all sentient creatures. Concurrently, Hindu philosophical inquiry profoundly explored concepts of ultimate cosmic unity, the intrinsic divine essence residing within every individual soul, and the cyclical nature of reincarnation or rebirth. When one attentively considers Jesus's discourses, such as his reflections on the lilies of the field, or his pronouncements regarding the immanent kingdom of God within, or his assertion that the humble shall inherit the earth, the profound resonance with Eastern spiritual traditions appears to subtly stir just beneath the veneer of his familiar teachings. Is it conceivable that these striking thematic echoes are merely the product of fortuitous happenstance? Or alternatively, might they represent profound insights and spiritual seeds meticulously sown and nurtured during extensive journeys undertaken along the fabled Silk Road? Let us vividly picture the youthful Jesus navigating the throngs of itinerant merchants and devout pilgrims, his humble sandals thoroughly caked with the fine dust accumulated over countless miles of arduous travel. He traverses the vibrant city of Damascus, with its bustling souks, redolent with the intoxicating aromas of saffron and frankincense. He then journeys through the ancient realm of Persia, where sacred fire temples radiate an ethereal glow against the deepening evening sky, their eternal flames meticulously tended by venerated priests who articulate profound doctrines concerning the ceaseless cosmic interplay between illuminating light and encroaching darkness. He ascends treacherous mountain passes where the atmospheric air becomes noticeably rarefied, only to subsequently descend into lush, fertile valleys brimming with a riot of vibrant colors and a symphony of natural sounds. Each deliberate step propels him further into diverse lands where a multiplicity of deities are revered, and yet where profound spiritual sagacity frequently converges upon a singular, overarching truth: that the divine essence is not remote or aloof, but rather intimately proximate, intricately woven into the very fundamental fabric of all existence. The concept of the Silk Road is not merely a historical pathway. It represents a profound intertwining of human experience, a nexus woven deeply into the very fabric of global existence. Along the bustling thoroughfares of this ancient network, at the numerous roadside inns and bustling caravanserais, a vibrant symphony of human languages would have resonated. Greek, Aramaic, Sanskrit, and Chinese voices rising and falling with the rhythmic cadence of distant, undulating seas. A young man hailing from the secluded region of Galilee might have initially felt like an outsider in such cosmopolitan settings, yet he would likely have been met with a measure of acceptance, for the savvy merchants of those times prized compelling narratives and insightful wisdom as highly as they valued gleaming silver, and venerable sages were universally honored wherever their wanderings might lead them. In these dynamic crucibles of cultural interaction and exchange, it is not difficult to conjure an image of a thoughtful young individual intently listening, deeply absorbing the myriad perspectives and diverse philosophies, and quietly commencing the profound intellectual and spiritual formation that would, in due course, astound and profoundly influence his own people. Beyond its physical manifestation as a travel route, the Silk Road profoundly symbolizes an enduring interconnectedness. It posits a world where no land remained entirely isolated, where no spiritual conviction or faith tradition was left utterly untouched by the influence of its geographical neighbors. The compelling notion that Jesus himself might have traversed these legendary pathways serves, in part, as an acknowledgement that his transformative teachings possess an intellectual and spiritual breadth far exceeding the confines of the Palestinian soil from which they initially sprang, suggesting instead that they resonate with the universal spirit and breathe the invigorating air of numerous distant lands. Naturally, diligent historians are quick to point out the conspicuous absence of any direct, irrefutable evidence supporting such journeys. The canonical Gospels, the primary accounts of his life, maintain a profound silence on this particular matter. Furthermore, the purported ancient manuscripts that claim to chronicle the life of Isa, a figure many associate with Jesus, continue to be subjects of intense scholarly debate and considerable contestation. And yet, it is precisely this historical void, this eloquent silence, that paradoxically creates an expansive imaginative space, allowing speculation and contemplation to unfurl without constraint. For within the hushed expanse of those undocumented lost years, the tantalizing possibility of the Silk Road beckons with an irresistible allure, much like a half-remembered, exquisite melody, distant and faint perhaps, yet strangely familiar and deeply resonant. One might close one's eyes and endeavor to truly listen, to discern the characteristic creak of heavily laden caravan wheels, the soft, rhythmic padding of camels' hooves across sun-baked sand, and the harmonious murmur of countless tongues blending into a singular, overarching human chorus. Somewhere amidst that ancient, vibrant tapestry of sound and movement, a young seeker, perhaps, walked with quiet purpose, his perceptive gaze fixed upon horizons that no gospel narrative has ever explicitly recorded. While his actual footsteps may be irrevocably lost to the annals of time, the profound and persistent thought endures that the profound wisdom emanating from Galilee could well have been profoundly shaped and forged along the winding, storied paths of the Silk Road, a timeless conduit where the rich tapestries of East and West have perpetually converged, both in the eloquent silence of shared experience and in the enduring power of human storytelling. Far beyond the arid expanses of Judea's deserts and the meandering caravan routes traversing ancient Persia, there exists a sublime and enigmatic realm, perpetually enshrouded in ethereal mist and profound mountain silence, the verdant valleys of Kashmir. Nestled majestically within the towering embrace of the Himalayas, where pristine, snow-fed rivers meticulously carve out lush green valleys and majestic pines stretch skyward to pierce the very clouds, ancient legends continue to circulate, whispering tales of a revered holy man who, in a distant epoch, once walked these sacred grounds. Some of the local inhabitants refer to him by the name Isa, a denomination that resonates with a remarkable and intriguing phonetic similarity to Jesus. Others speak of a venerable prophet who journeyed from the distant West, a figure distinguished by his profound teachings of boundless compassion, his miraculous ability to heal the afflicted, and his ultimate mysterious disappearance, vanishing as enigmatically as he had initially arrived. The precise origins of this deeply ingrained tradition prove exceptionally challenging to meticulously trace. Some of the earliest faint whispers of this narrative emerge within the oral tales faithfully transmitted by generations of Kashmiri villagers, compelling accounts of a profoundly wise teacher whose spiritual doctrines bore a striking resemblance to those espoused by the Christ figure revered in the Western world. By the 19th century, intrepid explorers and dedicated missionaries venturing into this remote region began to report hearing these captivating tales directly from the local populace. Nicholas Notovich, the very same traveler who famously claimed to have unearthed the controversial life of Issa manuscript within a secluded Ladakh monastery, also emphatically pointed towards Kashmir as a hallowed land where Jesus might once have trod. Subsequently, a diverse array of writers, encompassing both rigorous scholars and more speculative theorists, meticulously built upon these initial assertions, skillfully weaving them into the intricate and enduring theory of Jesus' hypothesized sojourn in India. Indeed, the very landscape of the valley itself seems to conspire harmoniously with the persistent legend. Within the ancient, labyrinthine lanes of Srinagar's old city, there stands a revered shrine known as Rosabal. This sacred site is held in profound veneration by certain local communities, who believe it to be the final resting place of a saint known as Uz Asaf, an enlightened teacher said to have journeyed from distant lands, whose life story curiously aligns with striking parallels to that of Jesus. Inside the hushed interior of the shrine, a venerable sarcophagus lies solemnly draped in rich cloth, enveloped in an almost palpable silence. For some observers, it is nothing more than the tomb of an unknown ascetic, a forgotten holy man. Yet, for others, it represents compelling evidence, a tangible sign that Jesus did not, in fact, perish on the cross, but rather embarked on an arduous journey eastward, ultimately living out his final serene days within Kashmir's tranquil green valleys. This controversial theory is largely dismissed by the majority of mainstream historians and remains a fiercely debated topic among theologians of various faiths. For devout Christians, its implications directly challenge the foundational and central claim of the resurrection. For adherents of Islam, the narrative intriguingly intersects with existing traditions that portray Jesus as a revered prophet who did not die a conventional death, but was instead miraculously taken up by God. For hardened skeptics, it is simply regarded as yet another intriguing legend, born from the fertile ground of historical silence and the enduring human yearning for profound meaning. Nevertheless, the sheer persistence and unbroken continuity of this captivating tale, whispered reverently for centuries within these majestic mountain valleys, renders it remarkably difficult to entirely disregard. If one chooses to momentarily set aside the intricate questions pertaining to tombs and sacred relics, the profound idea of Jesus embarking on a journey to Kashmir during his undocumented hidden years is undeniably imbued with significant symbolic weight. The region itself has long served as a quintessential meeting place for diverse cultures and profound spiritual traditions, a vibrant crucible where ancient Hindu, Buddhist, and later Islamic philosophies and practices converged and intertwined. To traverse this land was, by its very nature, to stand at the vibrant crossroads of ancient wisdoms. The serene and breathtaking landscapes, with their snow-capped peaks majestically reflected in the tranquil surfaces of still, pristine lakes, would have offered an unparalleled solitude, ideal for deep contemplation and spiritual introspection. Furthermore, the numerous monasteries, often nestled in remote, almost inaccessible mountain passes, would have undoubtedly extended a welcoming embrace to any earnest seeker who hungered for profound truth and enlightenment. One might vividly imagine Jesus walking beneath the towering, majestic Himalayan peaks, the crisp, thin mountain air invigorating his lungs, while brightly colored prayer flags snapped rhythmically in the gentle breeze. Picture him seated reverently with venerable monks in the soft, flickering glow of candlelight within ancient halls, listening intently to the hypnotic chants that would rise and fall with the measured rhythm of ocean waves. Envision him absorbing profound insights from ancient sages who spoke eloquently of spiritual detachment, of boundless compassion, and of the eternal, unifying essence of all existence. The tranquil rhythm of life in this elevated, pristine environment would have been markedly distinct from the bustling vineyards and fertile fields of Galilee. Yet the fundamental lessons imparted here, lessons of inherent gentleness, profound simplicity, and an abiding inner peace, would certainly not have been entirely foreign to the core tenets of his later, public teachings. Even if the compelling narrative of Kashmir ultimately proves to be more enduring legend than verifiable history, it nonetheless reflects something profoundly significant. An innate human recognition that Jesus' wisdom appears to inherently transcend mere geographical boundaries. His timeless words resonate powerfully across a multitude of cultures, finding profound echoes in truths taught within distant, secluded valleys just as much as they did within the ancient synagogues of Judea. The people of Kashmir, upon hearing the resonant echoes of their own deeply cherished traditions within the Gospels, found it entirely natural and spiritually harmonious to imagine that he had, at some point, walked among their revered mountains. In the quiet introspection of a reflective evening, Kashmir itself transforms into an integral part of this profound mystery. Its majestic valleys, cradled intimately between towering, snow-clad peaks, appear as a uniquely fitting and sacred setting for those hidden, undocumented years of his life. It is a land where a profound silence often reigns supreme, where the divine presence feels intimately close at hand, and where a wandering, enlightened teacher could potentially pass unnoticed by the wider world, yet simultaneously leave behind an indelible impression, a spiritual legacy too potent and enduring to ever truly fade into oblivion. One might close their eyes and vividly picture the valley at the onset of dusk. The pristine snow gleams faintly on the distant, rugged ridges. A crystal-clear river runs serenely, faithfully reflecting the last fading light of the setting sun. In a small, secluded village, a solitary traveler rests, his words uttered softly yet piercingly profound, his very presence leaving behind a memory too robust and enduring to ever truly dissipate. Whether ultimately deemed history or merely an eloquent legend, the valleys of Kashmir meticulously guard their secret, holding within their profound silence the tantalizing possibility that Jesus once walked there, his lost years forever sheltered within the majestic, timeless shadow of the Himalayas. Among the more unusual and deeply ingrained traditions that have gracefully traversed the centuries is the captivating tale asserting that Jesus, long before the commencement of his public ministry, undertook an extraordinary journey not eastward, but rather westward, braving treacherous seas and formidable storms to reach the mist-shrouded ancient islands of Britain. This compelling legend places him in the esteemed company of Joseph of Arimathea, his wealthy relative and, later, his discreet benefactor. Joseph, the narratives recount, was a man of considerable influence and substantial means, a prominent trader specializing in tin and other precious metals, commodities that were highly prized and eagerly sought after throughout the ancient world. His extensive trade routes reportedly led him to the very furthest reaches of the expansive Roman Empire, specifically to Cornwall, a rugged region where mines delved deep into the earth's crust and ships laden with their valuable cargo sailed into the waiting harbors of Gaul and beyond. It is within these very tales that a young boy, identified as Jesus, is said to have embarked on this remarkable voyage alongside Joseph. Together, they are believed to have sailed along Britain's rugged, dramatic coastlines, where towering cliffs rise sheer and defiant from the churning sea, and vast, desolate moors stretch endlessly beneath wide, ever-changing skies. The legends further suggest that he walked among the verdant green hills, that he gazed in profound wonder at ancient stone circles, monuments far older than any recorded memory, and that he listened intently to the resonant voices of the Druids, whose intricate wisdom was inextricably bound to the earth's rhythms, the celestial dance of the stars, and the cyclical procession of the seasons. Medieval poets played a crucial role in keeping this captivating story alive through their verses. Centuries later, the celebrated poet William Blake would immortalize this very idea in his own powerful poetry, famously posing the evocative question of whether those feet in ancient time walked upon England's mountains green. The question itself, deeply embedded in the national consciousness, evolved into a form of sacred inquiry, intricately entwined with a profound yearning for the tangible presence of the divine within the very soil of the homeland. To entertain the thought that the Christ had, at some point, stood upon Britain's ancient shores was to inherently sanctify the land itself, to weave it intimately into the sacred and unfolding drama of human history. One might ponder what such an extraordinary journey could have possibly offered to a young man from Galilee. While the British Isles were undeniably remote, they were far from isolated. Tin extracted from the mines of Cornwall was a highly coveted commodity across the entire Mediterranean basin, and robust trade routes inherently bound even these distant lands to the very heart of the sprawling Roman Empire. In the bustling coastal villages, a young Jesus might have witnessed a fascinating mingling of diverse cultures, Romans, Celts, and Phoenicians, all crossing paths and engaging in commerce within the vibrant marketplace. He may have heard myriad stories of various gods, some fierce and formidable, others gentle and benevolent, deities who presided over winding rivers and sacred groves, gods who demanded solemn sacrifice, and gods who possessed the power to heal. He might even have walked among the enigmatic stone monuments, precisely aligned with the celestial bodies, thereby learning how ancient peoples interpreted the heavens not through written parchment, but through the enduring language of stone itself, meticulously crafted to mirror the cosmos. Of course, from the rigorous perspective of professional historians, this tale is largely considered more a cherished legend than a verifiable likelihood. There exists no explicit record in Roman writings, nor any concrete archaeological proof to substantiate the notion that the young boy from Nazareth ever crossed the sea to Britain. However, the remarkable endurance and widespread cultural embrace of this particular story convey something far more profound. It eloquently reveals that people across Europe harbored a deep and abiding longing to imagine themselves intimately woven into the intricate tapestry of Christ's life. If 18 crucial years of his life remained largely undocumented, then why not here, on their own ancestral soil, beneath their own familiar sky. This powerful legend provided them with a profound sense of belonging, a cherished share in the unfolding of a sacred, universal narrative. One might close their eyes and vividly picture the scene: the wild, untamed Atlantic Ocean surging relentlessly against formidable black cliffs, gulls wheeling gracefully in the crisp, salt-laden air. The thunderous crash of waves echoes profoundly within hidden coves. A small, unassuming boat drifts gently into the harbor, its sail patched from previous journeys, its wooden hull creaking softly with the movement of the water. Among the modest crew is a young boy, dark-haired and profoundly thoughtful, his discerning gaze fixed intently upon the distant horizon. He steps ashore, his sandals crunching softly against the pebbled beaches, and for that fleeting, sacred moment, the ancient isle is transformed into hallowed ground. And for a moment, the isle becomes sacred territory. Whether or not its occurrence is verifiable, the narrative concerning Britain's unremembered coastline speaks profoundly to the innate human yearning to seek connection with the boundless. The mere contemplation that Jesus Christ might have once traversed those ancient lands, amidst their mines and moors, imbues with spiritual significance not only the physical landscape, but also the very faculty of imagination. Within that expansive realm of thought, the profound quietude surrounding his formative, unrecorded years is once again permeated, not by irrefutable evidence, but by a pervasive sense of awe and wonder. For the lacuna in sacred texts does not merely persist, it broadens, it intensifies, into this expanding void rush, legends such as these, transforming unspoken narratives into vibrant melodies. And so, the potent winds of Britain, sweeping across rugged precipices and verdant fields, seem even now to carry a faint, ethereal echo of forgotten footsteps, belonging to a figure who may or may not have once walked their ancient shore. If the undocumented period of Jesus' life remains enveloped in an enduring quietude, one of the most straightforward yet profoundly intriguing hypotheses posits that his intellectual and spiritual development transpired not within hallowed temples or secluded monastic retreats, but within the vibrant nucleus of the ancient marketplace. For in the first century, commercial exchange constituted the vital essence of global interaction, transporting not merely commodities, but also narratives, melodies, and diverse cultural expressions across vast continents. Wherever merchants congregated, intellectual currents converged, and perhaps more intensely than in any other locale. It was within such dynamic spaces that a young man could genuinely encounter the immense breadth of human intellect and philosophy. Nazareth itself was situated in close proximity to Sepphoris, a flourishing urban center undergoing extensive reconstruction during Jesus' youth. Merely a day's journey on foot, this city teemed with activity from Roman officials, Greek artisans, Jewish scholars, and wayfarers arriving from every conceivable direction. Some commentators have put forth the notion that Joseph and his son might have been employed there as carpenters, meticulously shaping timber for residential structures and workshops, for spanning bridges and supporting beams. If this theory holds true, Jesus would have stood daily at a veritable confluence of civilizations, immersed in a polyglot soundscape, with the cadences of Latin in one ear, Greek in another, and his native Aramaic in his own tongue. One might readily envision him within the bustling market square, surrounded by stalls laden abundantly with succulent figs and ripe olives, vibrantly dyed fabrics, and intricately hammered bronze artifacts. A merchant originating from the eastern reaches might be observed unrolling exquisite silk, gleaming with a liquid fluidity. Another, hailing from the African continent, could be seen offering ivory carved with masterful artistry. The metallic chime of currency, the raucous calls of beasts of burden, and the spirited negotiations over value would fill the air. And in the very midst of this vibrant chaos, narratives circulated with the same effortless abundance as exotic condiments. Accounts of far-flung conflicts, profound philosophical tenets originating in the academies of Athens, and esoteric religious practices observed in the sacred edifices of India. A discerning youth who paid close attention could assimilate a greater breadth of knowledge within this dynamic setting than from any written parchment. Traders, too, functioned as unconventional pedagogues of a sort. They imparted insights with the same unassuming ease as they transported their merchandise, passing along aphorisms, maxims, and fragments of spiritual conviction gathered during their extensive travels. From these itinerant figures, Jesus might have gleaned information concerning the sacred flames of Zoroastrian worship in Persia, the serene cloisters of Buddhist devotion in Bactria, or the ancient practitioners of Egyptian medicine employing botanical remedies and mystical invocations. He could have heard news of the ceaseless expansion of Roman dominion, of emperors crowned and slain, and of the brutal spectacles of gladiatorial combat in remote amphitheaters. To one with truly open ears, the very fabric of existence served as an unwritten sacred text. This particular hypothesis posits Jesus's hidden years not as a period of solitary spiritual journeys to far-off lands, but rather as one of mundane engagement, in diligent work, in attentive listening, and in the gradual assimilation of ambient narratives and dialogues that perpetually surrounded him. The market, by its very nature, was a nexus of opposing forces, presenting the stark juxtaposition of avarice and benevolence, brutality and compassion, exploitation and authentic camaraderie. To observe such profound human experiences was to gain profound insights into the essence of human character, its inherent vulnerabilities, and its innate capacity for greatness. Later, when Jesus articulated narratives concerning affluent individuals and impoverished bereaved women, of misplaced currency and concealed riches, his illustrative parables may have resonated with the precise vignettes he once observed among the traders. There is something subtly profound and aesthetically pleasing in this notion that the designated Son of Man acquired profound understanding not solely from revered spiritual instructors, but also from the common populace, from the spirited negotiations of vendors, the embellished accounts of itinerants, the earnest entreaties of the destitute, and the early morning transactions of agriculturalists. In the cacophony of commerce, he may have perceived the comprehensive mosaic of human longing and aspiration, and within that intricate tapestry, he may have discerned the veiled structures of divine sovereignty. Picture him once more, not as a lone itinerant traversing arid landscapes or lofty peaks, but as an adolescent figure amidst the commercial hubbub, keenly observing, attentively heeding, and profoundly assimilating. A vendor of aromatic commodities grinds cinnamon between his fingers, liberating its fragrant essence into the ambient air. A spinner of yarns enthralls young audiences with captivating tales of distant lands. A fatigued procession traverses the thoroughfare, its dromedaries burdened with rolls of fabric, its handlers vocalizing in unfamiliar idioms. The young man pauses unobtrusively at the periphery, his gaze luminous, his intellect actively processing. No one registers his presence. He is merely one among many countenances in the throng. Yet within him, the scriptural lacuna pulsates with acute perception, with an immeasurable accumulation of knowledge, and with nascent kernels of sagacity destined to blossom into profound allegories. The theory of Jesus among traders, while perhaps not possessing the epic scope of expeditions to distant lands like Egypt or India, nonetheless carries a deep-seated verity. That enlightenment frequently springs forth not from exceptional circumstances, but from meticulous engagement with the commonplace. The Gospel's silence may obscure not grand expeditions, but rather the serene, continuous formation of an individual's inner being, a soul who perceived with unparalleled profundity. And so, the ephemeral market booths recede into the annals of recollection, their multitudinous sounds dispersed like motes upon the breeze, yet perhaps hidden within their everyday disarray lay the initial reverberations of doctrines destined to transform global consciousness. Teachings originating not solely from the pronouncements of seers and clerics, but from the transactions of merchants and the narratives of itinerants, from existences intrinsically interwoven within the fundamental exchange of a dynamic, globally linked society. When the Gospels avert their attention from a span nearing 20 years of Jesus' life, the subsequent quietude appears almost volitional, as though inserted not fortuitously, but with conscious intent. It is a silence imbued with profound significance, akin to a caesura within a hallowed composition, or an interlude between respirations where the very tranquility integrates into the musical structure. To peruse the sacred texts with meticulous attention is to notice the palpable deliberateness of that unspoken period, as if it were safeguarding something either excessively invaluable or perilously potent to be vocalized. In ancient writing, taciturnity did not invariably signify vacancy. Sometimes it was an expression of profound veneration, a way of preserving the indescribable from profane scrutiny. The Hebrew scriptures themselves often envelop enigmatic truths in unspoken periods. The divine appellation left unuttered, the undisclosed period of Moses' life spent in the land of Midian, the protracted quietude separating prophetic utterance from its realization. To refrain from articulation was, on certain occasions, to communicate comprehensively. It safeguarded that which verbal expression might invariably misrepresent. The authors of the Gospels likely comprehended this principle. Their primary objective was not to furnish an exhaustive biographical account, but rather to proclaim the salvific message, to disclose the pivotal elements essential for spiritual conviction. Of what consequence was it whether the artisan from Nazareth matured unobtrusively, removed from public scrutiny? Perhaps the gap was a kind of shroud of spiritual mystery, reminding us that the divine dominion cannot be entirely encapsulated in written form. Yet the silence also elicits inquiries that persist relentlessly. If those years were devoid of consequence, why retain even the recollection of their non-disclosure? Why not commence directly with his public service? Instead, the gospel narratives render the lacuna discernible, akin to a portal presented but never unlatched. That door beckons conjecture even while impeding access. It is as though the writers wanted us to know. Here lies a concealed compartment, yet its substance remains undisclosed to us. Some theologians suggest that the unspoken period was intended to cultivate faith. By eschewing those unrecorded periods, The Gospel narratives compel the reader to concentrate not upon the progressive revelation of an existence, but upon the imperative mission that erupts abruptly, seemingly from an unknown origin. Jesus emerges complete, luminous, and wholly ready. His inherent power derives not from a chronicled formative period, but from the enigmatic quality of his very being. The unrecorded decades intensify the impression that his advent stems not from mortal cultivation, but from a celestial mandate. And yet quietude is never entirely vacant. The lost years invite extrapolation, creative envisioning, and profound yearning. They transform into a metaphorical easel upon which successive eras have depicted their individual interpretations of the Christ figure. Esoteric practitioners populated them with clandestine rites of passage, academicians with assiduous intellectual pursuit, and cynics with unremarkable anonymity. In this way, the unspoken period proves more productive than verbal articulation. It is the domain where every spiritual aspirant encounters the enigma according to their unique perspective. Imagine the very absence of sound as an instructor. In the tranquility of undocumented decades, Jesus may have assimilated insights more profound than any written text could impart. The virtues of forbearance, diligence, and contemplative isolation. These were the wisdom gleaned from observing the cyclical transformations of nature, from heeding the lamentations of the impoverished, from witnessing inequity manifest within the commercial arena. Sometimes quietude imparts greater understanding than verbal discourse. It divests one of superficial diversions, preserving solely the fundamental core of significance. The esoteric quietude of sacred writings, then, is not simply an omission to be regretted, but a spiritual curtain to be meditated upon. Resembling the sanctum sanctorum of the temple, hermetically sealed and imperceptible, it posits that sacrosanctity necessitates concealment. Certain verities must persist unarticulated, not owing to their vacuity, but because they are excessively profound, too resplendent to be circumscribed. As you seek repose this evening, permit that pervasive quietude to envelop you. Consider those undocumented decades not as a void, but as an active presence, latent, expectant, developing. It is the tranquility preceding the tempest, the calm preceding profound disclosure. Just as the nocturnal period anticipates the advent of daybreak, so the scriptural quietude readies humanity for the utterance that will one day resonate powerfully from the summit. The articulation that will convey wisdom through allegories and supplications. The pronouncement destined for eternal remembrance. And fervent devotions, the reverberant resonance that will forever echo. The profound quietude, therefore, represents an intrinsic component of the overarching narrative, a deliberate interlude meticulously etched into the chronicle. It serves as a poignant reminder that not every facet of existence can, or indeed should, be articulated. Some enigmas persist not for eventual deciphering, but rather for profound veneration. Consequently, the unrecorded epochs within the Gospel accounts transform from a perceived deficiency into a distinctive characteristic, a hallowed stillness that reverberates across the millennia, subtly conveying that even amidst apparent non-existence, the divine essence steadfastly endures. When the nascent Christian assemblies commenced the compilation of their sacred scriptures, the dearth of information concerning Jesus' formative, undocumented years might not have been the sole instance of informational lacuna. Concurrent with the canonical Gospels that ultimately gained acceptance, a plethora of other accounts circulated. Manuscripts subsequently categorized as apocryphal gospels deemed heretical, and oral traditions meticulously preserved through hushed utterances rather than inscribed on parchment. A segment of these narratives boldly recounted aspects of Jesus' adolescence, his peregrinations, and even his pedagogical activities beyond the confines of Judea. Nevertheless, the custodians of Orthodox doctrine exercised meticulous discernment, resulting in the exclusion of a substantial volume of material. The methodical process of establishing the canon was neither expeditious nor uncomplicated. Over successive centuries, ecclesiastical leaders and synods deliberated extensively on which writings genuinely conveyed the authentic voice of Christ and which were destined for rejection. The quartet of canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, emerged as foundational pillars, while scores of alternative texts faced condemnation, concealment, or eventual oblivion. Among these ostracized compositions were writings that audaciously attempted to illuminate the very periods the sanctioned canon conspicuously omits. Their continued existence, whenever it miraculously occurred, was frequently precarious. A fleeting excerpt cited in an early church father's correspondence, a manuscript secreted within arid cavern networks, or a whispered rumor of a scroll meticulously safeguarded within a monastic library. What underlying motivations prompted the suppression of these alternative traditions? Perhaps some appeared excessively bizarre, replete with tales of a youthful Jesus miraculously incapacitating playmates only to subsequently resurrect them, or miraculously fashioning avian figures from clay through mere utterance. Others might have subtly intimated foreign influences, echoing elements of Hellenic philosophy, esoteric Eastern wisdom, or ancient Egyptian arcana. Still other accounts portrayed a more recognizably human Jesus, one who underwent developmental stages, acquired knowledge, and even experienced internal conflicts, rather than embodying a figure of inherent, flawless prescience. In their endeavor to safeguard a cohesive theological framework, the early church fathers may have harbored apprehension regarding such a divergent spectrum of recollections. Silence, once more, was perceived as a more secure option than embracing multifarious perspectives. The momentous discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library during the 20th century reignited scholarly fascination with these esoteric traditions. Within earthenware vessels interred beneath desert escarpments and in codices carefully concealed by monastic orders, academics unearthed long-forgotten texts, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Truth. These profound writings unveiled a tapestry of early Christianity far more variegated than the version meticulously preserved within the canon. Characterized by mystical undertones, rich symbolism, replete with enigmatic pronouncements, and alternative historical narratives. None, however, furnished a definitive chronicle of the missing years. Yet, many subtly suggested that a considerable amount of information had been purposefully withheld. It is inherently alluring to contemplate what other revelations might still await discovery. Some speculate about scrolls secreted within remote Himalayan monasteries, purportedly detailing Jesus' travels to the East. Others allude to manuscripts hermetically sealed within the Vatican's clandestine archives, deemed too incendiary for public disclosure. Irrespective of whether these assertions possess veracity or are merely products of folklore, they undeniably reflect a profound intuitive understanding that silence is often a consequence of deliberate enforcement rather than mere happenstance. That the unrecorded years may not have been forgotten, but rather intentionally obscured. Envision the scriptorium of an ancient monastery bathed in the flickering glow of oil lamps, the atmosphere redolent with the fragrance of incense. A diligent scribe meticulously copies a gospel, his stylus rhythmically etching across the vellum. He pauses thoughtfully over a particular passage, wrestling with the decision of whether to include it. Behind him, an abbot subtly shakes his head. It is preferable to omit. It is better to allow the silence to persist. It is wiser to safeguard the profound mystery than to unveil that which might sow confusion or discord. The page remains unblemished, the words irretrievably lost, and with that singular determination, the very trajectory of history is irrevocably altered. The existence of suppressed traditions serves as a potent reminder that what ultimately endures is never the complete historical account. Power dynamics, inherent anxieties, and profound reverence all profoundly influence the collective archive of human memory. When confronted with the lacuna of Jesus' undocumented years, we encounter not merely an absence, but also a decisive selection. Someone at some juncture determined what elements we would recall and what information would remain beyond our grasp. The prevailing silence is not an empty void. It is a carefully curated construct. This profound realization invariably engenders a subtle sense of disquiet. How much of the past has been intentionally effaced? How many profound truths lie buried beneath arid desert sands, sequestered behind the impenetrable doors of ancient libraries, or languishing within the attenuating recollections of oral traditions? The missing years of Jesus may represent merely the most renowned illustration of a more pervasive truth: that history encompasses not solely what is openly recounted, but also what is meticulously concealed. Thus, when we encounter suppressed traditions, we are implicitly invited to engage in a more profound act of listening, not only to the words that have survived, but also to the encompassing silence that enfolds them. For within that silence resides the faint echo of narratives once articulated, perhaps patiently awaiting their moment of rediscovery. The protracted silence within the gospel narratives may not be a mere historical accident, nor simply the outcome of deliberate suppression. For some, it resonates instead as an intentional shroud, a clandestine period of intensive preparation, during which Jesus momentarily withdrew from the public stage of history to undergo a transformative shaping for the momentous events that lay ahead. From this perspective, the lost years are not, in fact, lost at all. They are purposefully veiled, enshrouded in an aura of mystery because they pertained not to public demonstration, but to a profoundly private process of becoming. Every human existence encompasses such periods, though few are ever truly recognized. Years characterized by quiet development, by patient anticipation, by an internal metamorphosis that leaves scant tangible record, but fundamentally alters everything. A seed germinating in subterranean darkness, an unseen chrysalis, the nascent light preceding the full dawn. Perhaps the life of Jesus encompassed its own hidden interlude, a crucial period when the foundational principles of his divine mission were established not through overt miracles, but through profound quietude. Certain theologians propose that this veil of secrecy preserves an essential reverence. To meticulously expose every moment of his formative years would have inevitably diminished the profound mystery of the Incarnation, reducing the divine essence to a mere chronological sequence of mundane days. By leaving these years unarticulated, the Gospels subtly impress upon us that not every aspect of Christ's existence was intended for human observation. Some elements belonged exclusively to the divine realm. Others perceive within this veil a discernible pattern of divine orchestration and preparation. Moses, for instance, spent 40 years in the wilderness of Midian before returning to assume leadership of Israel. The prophets frequently retreated into desolate wildernesses prior to receiving their divine summons. Even John the Baptist emerged into public ministry only after years of profound solitude. Within this established rhythm, Jesus' hidden years seamlessly integrate. A distinct period of separation during which ordinary days were meticulously interwoven into an extraordinary state of readiness. The silence, therefore, may signify not neglect, but rather sacred patience. There is an inherent aesthetic appeal in envisioning those years as a period of serene preparation. Perhaps Jesus embraced a simple existence, toiling with his hands, observing the cyclical turning of the seasons, and diligently caring for his family. Perhaps he roamed the rolling hills, intimately learning the intricate rhythms of creation, the graceful flight of the sparrow, the gradual maturation of the olive, the abundant harvest of the vineyard. Perhaps he engaged in profound solitude, intently listening for the powerful voice that would one day resound within him. The preparatory phase need not have been outwardly extraordinary to be profoundly impactful. Even the most mundane routines can attain a sacred quality when imbued with mindful attention. The veil also compels us to consider that profound transformation frequently necessitates a period of concealment, much as a seed must remain buried beneath the earth before it can spectacularly burst forth. Thus, perhaps Jesus' early manhood remained hidden because the opportune moment for revelation had not yet arrived. When he finally appeared at the Jordan, the impact was immeasurably greater precisely because he emerged from a profound silence. The hidden years rendered the sudden commencement of his ministry all the more striking, akin to a bolt of lightning dramatically illuminating a darkened sky. Imagine those formative years as an intricate tapestry meticulously woven in secret, each thread carefully placed. Yet the complex pattern remains entirely concealed until the enveloping veil is finally lifted. When Jesus commences his teaching, his healing, his acts of forgiveness, we witness the revealed tapestry, but the arduous process of its creation remains entirely unseen. The Gospels present us with the magnificent finished work, not the protracted labor that underpinned its making. Our own individual lives, too, contain their own hidden seasons, periods when seemingly little of consequence transpires, when our days feel ordinary, unremarkable, and largely unnoticed. Yet, within those very seasons, a profound process of preparation may be silently unfolding. Silence does not equate to absence. Hiddenness does not signify waste. It may in fact indicate that something unseen is diligently growing, patiently awaiting its designated time to manifest. And so the veil of preparation transcends a mere historical enigma. It transforms into a profound parable for our own lives. The missing years of Jesus serve as a poignant reminder that even the most pivotal journeys encompass extensive stretches of quietude when the narrative is inscribed not through public accomplishments, but through profound private transformation. The silence is not an emptiness. It is a state of readiness. Picture him now, a young man traversing the hills at twilight, the sky gradually deepening into hues of violet, the air crisp with the approaching night. He carries no sacred scrolls, performs no miracles, gathers no disciples, only the serene certainty of one who is undergoing a profound shaping for a destiny not yet unveiled. The world remains oblivious to his presence. History fails to record his existence. Yet, within that profound silence, the future is already subtly stirring. To contemplate the undocumented years of Jesus is also to envision the complex world into which he was born. A vibrant world teeming with cultural intersections, where diverse traditions overlapped and ancient wisdom flowed like converging rivers forming a sprawling delta. The Mediterranean Sea was far from a secluded basin. It functioned as a bustling gateway. Ideas journeyed alongside merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims with the same unwavering certainty as exotic spices and luxurious silks. Within this dynamic setting, the silence of the Gospels transforms into a fertile canvas for boundless possibility. Perhaps Jesus matured not in isolation, but amidst the ceaseless hum of vibrant cultural exchange. Galilee itself was a pivotal crossroads. Galilee resonated with an incessant, vibrant hum of cultural interchange. The very terrain of this region inherently served as a significant crossroads, a natural meeting point where diverse civilizations intersected and intermingled. It was a geographical nexus, constantly alive with the dynamic interplay of varied traditions and peoples. Strategically positioned, the area traversed crucial commercial arteries that inextricably linked the ancient dominion of Egypt with the fertile lands of Syria, and the traditional heartland of Judea with the expansive Roman Empire. Consequently, the various settlements within Galilee frequently witnessed the disciplined march of Roman legions, heard the eloquent discourses of Greek philosophers, absorbed the profound teachings of Jewish rabbis, and observed the lively negotiations of international traders. Even in the seemingly secluded village of Nazareth, the resonant echoes of far-off civilizations were perpetually discernible. The young individual destined to articulate profound concepts of divine governance and worldly wealth, to illustrate lessons with the delicate beauty of wildflowers and the bounty of agricultural yields, might well have been, from an early age, internalizing the intricate rhythms and diverse linguistic tapestry of a territory profoundly shaped by a multitude of cultures and their respective influences. Should this enigmatic figure have ventured beyond the familiar confines of Galilee, as certain historical traditions provocatively intimate, the convergence of cultural and intellectual currents would have undoubtedly intensified, becoming even more profoundly enriching. In the bustling, intellectual hub of Alexandria, for instance, he could have encountered brilliant Greek philosophers engaged in fervent debates concerning the very essence and immortality of the soul. Perhaps adjacent to erudite Jewish scholars meticulously poring over the sacred texts of the Torah, rendered accessible in the Hellenistic lingua franca. Further afield, in the ancient kingdom of Persia, he might have observed the mesmerizing spectacle of Zoroastrian fire altars ablaze, their eternal flames serving as potent emblems of a profound cosmic dualism, representing the perpetual struggle between light and darkness. Venturing along the legendary Silk Road, a conduit for both goods and ideas, he could have come across serene Buddhist monks, distinguished by their distinctive saffron vestments, eloquently expounding upon the virtues of profound compassion and the path to ultimate liberation from the cycle of suffering. Each of these geographical locations functioned as an indispensable node within an expansive, intricate global network, perpetually transmitting a multitude of voices and ideas that reverberated across entire continents. When one attentively considers the subsequent profound teachings delivered by Jesus, subtle yet unmistakable indications of this pervasive interconnectedness invariably comes to light. His illustrative parables, for instance, possess a remarkable quality of appearing universally comprehensible. Narratives such as seeds scattered upon varied types of terrain, illuminating lamps concealed beneath bushels, or invaluable riches interred within agricultural plots. These vivid metaphors transcend specific cultural boundaries. Indeed, these compelling narratives possess the capacity for ready comprehension, not solely within the confines of Judea, but equally within virtually any agrarian society across the globe, or more broadly, within any cultural context where the human spirit grappled profoundly with the fundamental emotions of aspiration and apprehension. His profound pronouncements concerning the benevolent affection for one's fellow human beings, the imperative of compassion, the virtue of modesty, and the transformative journey of internal renewal echo with fundamental verities articulated in distant, disparate civilizations. Whether acquired through extensive personal voyages, through the tutelage of various mentors, or simply through the subtle, pervasive influence of a profoundly multicultural global environment, his profound sagacity projects an aura far exceeding the intellectual boundaries of a solitary province. It is precisely for these profound reasons that the unrecorded period, commonly referred to as the missing years, holds such an irresistible allure and intellectual fascination. This enigmatic chronological gap introduces the compelling hypothesis that Jesus was profoundly molded not exclusively by the tenets and practices of his indigenous spiritual heritage, but also significantly by the vibrant, continuous discourse between diverse civilizations, that he occupied, whether consciously aware of it or not, a pivotal juncture where the distinct cultural paradigms of the Orient converged with those of the Occident, where ancient customs encountered emerging innovations. His subsequent profound teachings, while undeniably original in their essence, may not have been directly appropriated from other sources, but rather they could have been substantially informed, exquisitely enriched, and profoundly expanded by the expansive, harmonious chorus of collective human wisdom. One might vividly envision him standing at such a bustling nexus, a veritable hub of global activity. Imagine the sun-baked, dusty thoroughfares converging from every cardinal direction, teeming with an incessant procession of caravans arriving, their laden beasts of burden bringing goods from distant realms. Merchants meticulously unload their precious commodities, lustrous ivory transported from the heart of Africa, shimmering silk fabrics originating from the ancient dynasties of China, and exquisitely crafted glass articles from the sprawling Roman Empire. Hand in hand with these tangible goods, there invariably arrived an intangible cargo, captivating narratives of various deities and legendary heroes, intricate accounts of diverse religious rites and legal codes, and profound insights into wisdom painstakingly acquired through the crucible of human suffering. In this vibrant tableau, a young man stands, observing with quiet intensity, his gaze mirroring an unquenchable curiosity, his innermost being absorbing far more than mere linguistic expressions. This bustling intersection, one realizes, functions as more than just a site for commercial transactions. It is fundamentally a profound arena of human encounter and cultural synthesis. For contemporary individuals as well, the metaphorical crossroads continues to hold significant import and deep resonance. Our identities are sculpted not solely by the traditions and legacies bequeathed by our own ancestral heritage, but equally by the myriad voices that traverse the landscape of our personal existences. Companions, unfamiliar faces, literary works, musical compositions. Each contributes to the intricate tapestry of who we become, even if their influence registers merely as subtle, persistent whispers within our consciousness. Consequently, the profound silence enveloping Jesus's unrecorded years might well obscure precisely such formative encounters, moments when profound wisdom gradually permeated his being, not as an instantaneous, singular epiphany, but rather through the consistent and gradual convergence of diverse cultural influences. The enduring concept of Jesus as a pivotal bridge connecting disparate worlds holds validity on both historical and symbolic planes. From a historical vantage point, this perspective accurately mirrors the intricately interwoven reality that characterized the first century, a period marked by extensive interaction and mutual influence among various peoples and empires. On a symbolic level, it serves as a poignant reminder that fundamental truths frequently manifest and solidify at the very junctures where distinctions converge and intermingle, creating new syntheses. Thus, the so-called missing years might signify not merely a chronological void or an absence of documentation, but rather the crucial, formative period during which a universal message was meticulously forged, a message sufficiently expansive and inclusive to encompass the entirety of humankind. As the twilight descends and night's embrace deepens, one might once more conjure the evocative image of the bustling crossroads, picture the warm, wavering glow of lanterns casting shifting shadows, the harmonious cacophony of mingling voices carrying on the evening air, and the celestial expanse of stars steadily ascending in the velvet sky above. Within this transient confluence of humanity, somewhere amidst the ceaseless stream of travelers, a young man stands with unassuming composure, his presence largely unobserved, yet profoundly and irrevocably altered internally by the potent currents of ideas and experiences swirling around him. In that profound, unrecorded silence, the very trajectory of history poised, awaiting its destined unfolding. When contemplating the enigmatic lost years of Jesus, our collective imagination often instinctively drifts towards remote, exotic locales, to the vast, arid expanses of deserts and the majestic solitude of towering mountains, to ancient, distant temples and the wisdom imparted by foreign spiritual mentors. Nevertheless, an alternative perspective suggests that the profound truth of those unrecorded decades might reside not within the realm of the extraordinary or the exotic, but rather within the mundane and the quotidian, subtly concealed in plain sight. This truth could have been so intricately interwoven into the fundamental fabric of everyday existence, so seamlessly integrated into the rhythms of ordinary life, that it consequently left no discernible imprint upon the historical records or the parchment of ancient chronicles. Indeed, it is entirely conceivable that Jesus never embarked upon extensive journeys whatsoever. Instead, he might have resided with quiet diligence within the familiar confines of Nazareth, fulfilling the role of a carpenter's son, a brother within a modest family unit, and a fellow inhabitant alongside local farmers and itinerant traders. The conspicuous silence of the Gospels regarding this period, therefore, might not signify clandestine expeditions or secret tutelage, but rather a profound, understated simplicity, A succession of days dedicated to arduous labor, marked by the honest perspiration on his brow, and hands rendered rough and calloused from the habitual manipulation of various implements and the working of timber. Such an existence, characterized by its inherent humility and lack of formal documentation, might understandably have been deemed unworthy of meticulous preservation by the early compilers of the Gospels, whose primary focus lay elsewhere. Yet, paradoxically, this very period could have served as the profound crucible, the formative forge, in which his subsequent revolutionary teachings were meticulously shaped and refined. One need only consider the remarkable frequency with which his illustrative parables draw directly upon the most fundamental and unassuming rhythms of agrarian existence. The diligent sower meticulously casting seeds across both unyielding, rocky terrain and rich, fertile earth. The compassionate shepherd tirelessly seeking out a solitary, wayward lamb. The diligent woman sweeping her humble abode in anxious search of a lost coin. The shrewd merchant liquidating all his possessions to acquire a single pearl of immeasurable value. These evocative images, despite their simplicity, are imbued with the profound gravity of deep spiritual verity. Nevertheless, their origins are clearly traceable to the commonplace occurrences and familiar vistas of village life. It is as if the unrecorded years were dedicated to the meticulous collection of these vivid impressions, one by one, and their silent, careful refinement, until they were ready to radiate with luminous clarity within his parables. Furthermore, the very physical nature and robust endurance demonstrated throughout his public ministry may well be a direct testament to these preceding years of quiet, diligent manual labor. A skilled carpenter possesses an intimate understanding of the inherent robustness of various types of wood, the imperative for painstaking patience in the arduous process of construction, and the tangible, often costly, consequences of imprecision or oversight. Such an artisan is intimately familiar with the distinct grain patterns of both olive and cedar, the rhythmic clang of a hammer striking nails, the precise scrape of a chisel shaping material, and the enduring resilience required for solid stone foundations. Consequently, when Jesus later articulated concepts such as dwellings erected upon immutable bedrock or unstable sand, or spoke of burdens rendered light and yokes made comfortable, it is highly plausible that he was drawing directly upon the invaluable practical lessons first assimilated and internalized within the humble confines of a woodworking shop. To interpret his unrecorded years through this particular lens is to perceive them not as a mere chronological void or an inexplicable absence, but rather as a profound and meaningful presence, a thorough immersion within the everyday existence of his community. Concealed within the mundane, he experienced life precisely as they did, toiled with the same diligence as they, and endured the same hardships as his fellow villagers. His subsequent profound teachings, when they finally emerged, thus bore the unmistakable imprint of deeply shared human experience. He did not deliver his message from a position of elevated academic detachment, but rather from the deeply rooted sagacity of an individual who had authentically lived, breathed, and intimately understood the lives of those among whom he walked. Furthermore, an inherent mystery pervades the very ordinariness of this proposed existence. If the divine Son of God genuinely traversed the earthly realm, it remains profoundly striking that he did so for several decades devoid of any public spectacle, entirely without widespread recognition or acclaim. His neighbors likely perceived him solely as a reserved artisan, a quiet craftsman, nothing more significant than that. They may have encountered him routinely in the bustling village marketplace, entirely oblivious to the monumental fact that the individual destined to irrevocably transform the course of human history stood unassumingly beside them, his extraordinary nature completely unperceived. In moments of quiet contemplation, particularly during the thoughtful reflections that accompany the approach of night, this particular notion evokes both a profound sense of humility and an exquisite feeling of wonder. How frequently, one might ponder, do we inadvertently disregard or fail to perceive the sacred simply because it presents itself cloaked in the unassuming guise of the commonplace? How often do human beings ardently pursue profound revelations in far-off, exotic locales, while simultaneously neglecting the serene wisdom that steadily blossoms within the intimate confines of our own quotidian existence? The concept of these hidden years serves as a potent reminder that true greatness is frequently cultivated and meticulously prepared in periods of profound obscurity, and that the utterly extraordinary can quietly flourish and develop unobserved within the fertile soil of the ordinary. Let one's eyes gently close and allow the mind to conjure a vivid image of the ancient village of Nazareth. Visualize the unpretentious dwellings constructed from indigenous stone and sun-baked clay. Envision the verdant olive groves, their leaves shimmering gently under the caress of a warm breeze. Hear the joyful echoes of children's laughter reverberating through the labyrinthine, narrow pathways. Within a modest, unadorned workshop, a young man is depicted bending assiduously over a piece of timber, meticulously shaping it with expert, careful hands. His countenance is serene, his movements deliberate and unwavering. No scribe meticulously records his name. No chronicler meticulously marks the passage of his days. And yet, within that profound, unwritten silence, the very tapestry of history is being intricately woven and prepared. The enigmatic power of these lost years may not necessitate elaborate narratives of distant travels for their explanation. Perhaps their true significance lies simply in this: an existence lived with quietude, with profound completeness, and with attentive engagement amidst the unassuming rhythms of a village. Concealed effectively in plain view, the future instructor of eternal truths was, in essence, acquiring fundamental lessons from the very dust of the earth, from the honest perspiration of diligent toil, and from the simple yet profound pulse of human existence. A third, distinct interpretive framework presents itself for comprehending the profound silence enveloping Jesus' unrecorded years. This perspective diverges from the search for clandestine journeys or concealed ancient manuscripts, choosing instead to regard the very absence of information as an intentional, purposeful myth. Within this conceptualization, the chronological lacuna is not perceived as a mere historical oversight or an accidental omission, but rather as a deliberate symbolic space, a profound parable intricately woven into the foundational narrative structure of the Gospels themselves. Indeed, the venerable traditions of ancient narrative artistry frequently leveraged both deliberate silence and an aura of profound mystery as potent literary devices to elevate a central figure beyond the realm of the commonplace. Legendary heroes in such accounts were occasionally depicted as originating from circumstances steeped in wonder, subsequently disappearing from the documented record, only to dramatically re-emerge later, fully developed and prepared for their destined roles. This narrative archetype consistently places greater emphasis on an individual's predetermined destiny rather than their gradual, incremental development, prioritizing divine revelation over an observable human process of maturation. To meticulously illustrate the transitional journey of the boy evolving into the man would, in essence, imbue the narrative with a distinctly humanizing quality, grounding it firmly in observable human experience. However, by intentionally leaving this profound transformation unchronicled and concealed, the story is instead enveloped in an ethereal aura of the miraculous. The narrative silence, in this interpretation, implicitly declares, "Behold, here is an individual whose advent stems not from the gradual accumulation of human preparation or worldly experience, but rather from the boundless depths of divine mystery." For a segment of discerning scholars, the enigmatic missing years function with precise efficacy in this very manner. They are interpreted as a sophisticated literary device, a deliberate narrative interlude that dramatically amplifies the sudden and impactful commencement of his public ministry. When Jesus makes his momentous appearance at the Jordan River around the age of 30, the complete dearth of antecedent biographical information serves to intensely heighten the dramatic effect. He emerges not as a figure gradually molded by conventional life experiences, but rather as an individual arriving from an unknown, transcendent realm, imbued with an intrinsic authority that seemingly manifests spontaneously, without any discernible earthly origin. Consequently, the mythos surrounding these unrecorded years effectively serves to emphasize his inherent otherness, his profound mystery, and ultimately, his divine essence. Crucially, however, the designation of myth does not, in this context, equate to an assertion of falsehood. In the prevailing worldview of the ancient world, a myth often functioned as a potent vehicle for conveying profound truths that transcended mere factual accuracy. A strategically employed mythic silence, therefore, possesses the capacity to communicate with greater depth and resonance than an exhaustive, literal historical record. By intentionally omitting or erasing the developmental interlude, the Gospels might be subtly guiding their audience toward an understanding of a reality that exists fundamentally beyond the constraints of linear chronology. The ultimate message in this interpretation is that what held paramount significance was not the precise manner in which Jesus acquired knowledge or developed, but rather the immutable essence of who he inherently was. The essence of Jesus was not merely a learned attribute, but an inherent aspect of his being, a fundamental component of his identity. The canonical Gospel's deliberate omission of his formative years, often referred to as the hidden years, inherently suggests that his profound authority emanated not from any terrestrial instructor or conventional schooling, but rather from an eternal, divine source. Nevertheless, the enduring prevalence of apocryphal narratives and speculative legends concerning his peregrinations during this period underscores humanity's persistent inclination to bridge narrative gaps. The potent allure of this narrative void, this myth of silence, proved irresistibly evocative. For some, it sparked conjectures of extensive travels to the East, exploring ancient philosophies. For others, it conjured images of clandestine apprenticeships among enigmatic mystics and esoteric spiritual communities. Yet it is entirely plausible that the Gospel writers intended no such elaborate details. Perhaps their very reticence, their intentional lack of biographical elaboration, was precisely the crucial point they wished to convey. These lacunae in Jesus' early life serve as a profound testament to the notion that his existence transcended mere biographical documentation or a simple historical account. He was, in essence, the embodiment of profound mystery, his life not simply lived through a series of events, but rather divinely revealed. For the contemplative individual, particularly one seeking solace in quiet reflection, this interpretation fosters a deep sense of stillness. The narrative's deliberate silence transforms into an experience akin to the profound quietude between heartbeats, a sensation felt more acutely than it is articulated. It compels us to embrace that which eludes rational explanation, to find repose in the profound understanding that not every inquiry possesses a readily available answer. In certain profound instances, the very absence of information itself functions as the ultimate response. Envision the Gospels as a masterful painting, meticulously composed with intentional negative space. The central figure is rendered with clarity, yet the surrounding background remains deliberately unadorned. This purposeful emptiness serves to direct our perception, intensely sharpening our focus on the pivotal elements. The unrecorded years of Jesus' life operate precisely as this significant blankness. They serve as a poignant reminder that the narrative of Jesus is not an exhaustive chronicle of continuous details, but rather a meticulously curated series of divine revelations. From this perspective, the mythological aspect of the missing years functions as an invaluable lesson in humility. Humanity intrinsically yearns to comprehend every facet, to meticulously fill every narrative void with comprehensive explanations. However, true wisdom, on occasion, arises not from an abundance of words, but from their judicious scarcity. The profound power of the unspoken invites a heightened sense of wonder, cultivates deep reverence, and stimulates boundless imagination. Therefore, as one gently closes their eyes in contemplation, allow the profound silence of those unrecorded years to envelop them like a comforting lullaby. It is not an emptiness to be met with apprehension, but rather an enigmatic mystery to be embraced with an open heart. It stands as a powerful reminder that even within the uncharted territories, even amidst the profound unknown, the divine presence remains undeniably manifest. These missing years, much like myth itself, are not primarily designed to satiate mere curiosity, but rather to ignite a profound and enduring sense of awe. When one delves into the extensive silence enveloping Jesus' formative years, a rather disquieting hypothesis emerges: that these years were not merely forgotten or accidentally omitted from historical records, but rather intentionally shrouded in secrecy. The early Christian community, perhaps, strategically employed silence as a protective barrier, safeguarding information it deemed too sensitive to disclose, deliberately concealing details that might have potentially destabilized or challenged the nascent faith. The trajectory of history is frequently shaped not only by what is openly preserved, but also by what is purposefully suppressed. Ecclesiastical councils and diligent scribes played a pivotal role in determining which sacred texts would endure through time, which theological doctrines would be officially sanctioned, and which narratives would be summarily discarded. Had Jesus' unrecorded years encompassed interactions with diverse spiritual traditions, or if he had pursued studies under foreign philosophical mentors, or if his pronouncements had blurred the established boundaries of conventional faith, such particulars might have been perceived as excessively perilous to retain. Acknowledging these details could potentially dilute the assertion of his singular uniqueness, implying that Christ's profound wisdom was not entirely of divine origin, but perhaps partially derived from external sources. Even in contemporary times, persistent whispers circulate about concealed historical records, ancient scrolls purportedly sequestered within secluded monastic libraries, manuscripts meticulously locked away deep within the Vatican's labyrinthine archives, and fragmented texts hinting at extensive journeys to distant lands far beyond the familiar confines of Judea. While the majority of academic scholars tend to dismiss such assertions as mere legend or elaborate conspiracy theories, their very persistence underscores a pervasive intuition that something significant has been deliberately shielded. The pervasive silence feels remarkably intentional, as if a collective decision was made long ago that a deliberate act of forgetting would serve a greater purpose than an act of remembering. Imagine the venerable custodians of faith during the nascent centuries of Christianity, convened in dimly lit, shadowed chambers. A scribe meticulously unrolls an ancient scroll, its ink significantly faded, yet still distinctly legible, narrating an account of the young Jesus engaging in profound study among enigmatic foreign mystics. The assembled elders exchange knowing glances. Such a narrative, they might have reasoned, could undoubtedly sow confusion among the devout, blurring the crucial distinction between divinely ordained revelation and the more mundane human quest for knowledge. One by one, they deliberately shake their heads. The scroll is then carefully set aside, its contents destined never to be painstakingly copied, its memory intentionally allowed to gradually recede into obscurity. In this profound act, secrecy effectively transforms into an instrument of preservation. To contemplate the missing years from this perspective is to confront the compelling possibility that historical narratives are meticulously curated not merely through serendipitous accident, but through deliberate, conscious intention. Silence, in certain profound instances, functions as a formidable wall, constructed not primarily to safeguard an immutable truth, but rather to meticulously protect an established power structure. What lies concealed behind this metaphorical wall may forever remain unknown to us. Nevertheless, the very existence of the wall itself conveys a significant message: that at some point in the distant past, a conscious choice was made to meticulously guard, to intentionally withhold, and to definitively seal away certain narratives. For the individual gently drifting into a state of repose, this particular possibility evokes a complex blend of both unease and profound wonder. If secrets were indeed meticulously kept, it serves as a stark reminder of the inherent fragility of human memory, and how effortlessly narratives can be molded and reshaped by those who possess the authority to record them. Yet simultaneously, it also underscores the enduring resilience of mystery itself, which manages to persist and even thrive despite concerted efforts at suppression. A story that is too rigorously guarded often transforms into a compelling legend, whispered furtively in hushed tones, meticulously transmitted from one generation to the next, like a fragile ember carefully carried through the encroaching darkness. Perhaps this inherent human tendency is precisely why the concept of secrecy clings so tenaciously to the narrative surrounding Jesus' lost years. The pervasive silence feels less like a simple absence and more like a deliberate act of concealment, as if beneath the seemingly straightforward surface of the Gospels, a deeper, more profound current flows. We may never fully penetrate that enigmatic veil, yet the very act of engaging in such profound contemplation brings us undeniably closer to the heart of the mystery itself. Close your eyes and vividly imagine a venerable library from a distant epoch, its towering shelves meticulously laden with countless ancient scrolls. Fine dust motes gracefully dance through ethereal shafts of light filtering into the hushed space. Somewhere within this vast repository, perhaps, lies a solitary manuscript that possesses the potential to unravel the perplexing enigma of those 18 unrecorded years. However, it remains perpetually unopened, meticulously locked away in profound secrecy, its ancient words gradually fading into oblivion even as they are paradoxically preserved. We, the modern seekers, do not have the privilege of reading them. We are, quite simply, unable to. Yet their very silence resonates with a profound eloquence, echoing across the vast expanse of centuries, serving as a poignant reminder that what remains hidden is, at times, as immensely powerful as what is openly revealed. Within the profound hush that envelops the unrecorded years of Jesus' life, narratives frequently gravitate towards the evocative imagery of hidden manuscripts, scrolls meticulously inscribed and subsequently lost, ancient codices interred and then forgotten, fragile parchments patiently awaiting discovery beneath accumulated strata of dust and stone. The sheer concept itself possesses an almost dreamlike allure, suggesting that somewhere, perhaps in a remote, secluded library or a hermetically sealed cavern, the definitive answer to the enigma of those 18 formative years still lies preserved in ancient ink, patiently awaiting its eventual unearthing. The annals of history are replete with such remarkable recoveries. The Dead Sea Scrolls, serendipitously unearthed in the desolate caves of Qumran, unveiled a rich tapestry of Jewish intellectual thought contemporary with Jesus' era. Hymns, legal codes, and prophetic texts meticulously preserved in profound silence for nearly 2 millennia. Similarly, the Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, presented a diverse chorus of forgotten Christian voices, apocryphal gospels, revelatory texts, and mystical aphorisms meticulously hidden away by ancient monks who feared their imminent destruction. If such invaluable caches could endure for centuries unseen, why not others, perhaps still patiently awaiting their moment of revelation? Some persistent claims suggest that venerable monasteries nestled in Tibet, India, or Egypt purportedly house ancient manuscripts that directly recount Jesus' extensive wanderings in the mystical East. Indeed, intrepid travelers in the 19th century reported hearing local monks recite passages from ancient scrolls detailing a revered teacher named Isa, who journeyed from Israel to acquire and impart wisdom before ultimately returning to his homeland. Academic scholars remain sharply divided on these accounts. Some dismiss them as pure fabrication, while others discern fragments of authentic oral tradition meticulously embellished with mythological elements. Yet, even the most ardent skeptics cannot deny the profound resonance of this possibility. That somewhere, a written testimony exists, capable of bridging the significant chronological gap between Jesus as a child and as a mature man, between the humble origins of Nazareth and the pivotal baptismal event in the Jordan. Even within the Western world, whispers persist concerning sealed archival repositories. The Vatican Library, with its seemingly endless corridors and meticulously locked chambers, is frequently envisioned as a veritable vault of such profound secrets. Texts deemed either too fragile, too perilous, or too doctrinally controversial for public dissemination. Whether these conjectures are rooted in verifiable fact or intriguing fiction matters less than what they profoundly represent. The pervasive sensation that silence is not invariably a void, but rather a deliberate act of concealment, that forgotten manuscripts might indeed harbor truths intentionally sequestered, truths deemed too disruptive for the established tenets of orthodoxy. Imagine for a fleeting moment stumbling upon such an extraordinary text. A remarkably fragile scroll, its ancient edges delicately flaking, its venerable ink faded to a deep sepia hue. You painstakingly unroll it with utmost care, and there, nestled between lines of ancient Greek or Aramaic script, are words describing an epic journey, an enigmatic teacher, a profound spiritual vision. Perhaps it depicts Jesus engaged in deep philosophical discourse with revered sages in ancient India. Perhaps it portrays Jesus traversing desolate deserts alongside enigmatic mystics. Or perhaps it simply reveals Jesus diligently laboring in quiet contemplation within a humble Galilean workshop, his profound wisdom gradually blossoming in profound silence. Regardless of the specific details contained within, the mere existence of such a manuscript would fundamentally transform our comprehension, not only of his enigmatic life, but also of the very fabric of history itself. Yet a profound paradox emerges. Even if such extraordinary writings were indeed discovered, would they be universally accepted as authentic? Or would they, too, be swiftly dismissed as mere apocrypha, as fanciful fables meticulously spun to fill a pervasive void? The very intensity of humanity's hunger for definitive answers paradoxically renders us inherently suspicious of every potential answer offered. The silence surrounding these years is so profoundly deep that any voice attempting to break it sounds inherently uncertain, fragile, and inevitably contested. For the listener, now gently drifting in quiet contemplation, the evocative image of forgotten manuscripts transcends mere speculation, becoming a potent symbol. Whether these elusive texts genuinely exist or not, they serve as a profound reminder of the inherent fragility of human memory and the often hidden nature of truth, patiently awaiting discovery in profound silence. They also serve to remind us with poignant clarity that the grand narrative of history is never truly complete, that beneath the familiar words we currently know, countless layers of untold stories may still lie dormant, patiently slumbering. Close your eyes and vividly picture a venerable monastery perched precariously high amidst towering mountains. Thick snow gently gathers upon its ancient roof. The relentless wind howls mournfully against its stoic stone walls. Inside, a solitary monk moves with deliberate slowness by the flickering light of a single candle, meticulously unlocking a weathered wooden chest. Within, bound meticulously in aged cloth, lie ancient scrolls, unread for countless centuries. He pauses, carefully lifts one with a profound reverence, and begins to read its faded inscription. Outside, the profound silence of the night deepens further. Inside, a voice long since lost stirs once more, bravely breaking the pervasive silence. Perhaps such extraordinary manuscripts will never be found. Or perhaps they already exist, patiently waiting, subtly hidden in plain sight, until the world is truly prepared to hear their ancient wisdom. Until that momentous time, they remain an integral part of the enduring mystery. The forgotten manuscripts of Jesus' lost years, haunting the profound silence with an irresistible allure of possibility. The unrecorded years a profound and enduring void, continue to haunt the pervasive quietude with an intoxicating sense of possibility. Many generations subsequent to the passing of Jesus, as the nascent Christian faith gained a firm foothold and began its extensive proliferation, a distinct collective of spiritual aspirants emerged. These individuals, known historically as the Desert Fathers and Mothers, intentionally retreated into the stark, desolate expanses of regions like Egypt, Syria, and Palestine. They willingly abandoned the bustling urban centers and the accompanying conveniences of civilized life, opting instead for an existence within austere caves, rudimentary huts, and secluded monastic cells. Their profound quest was not for superficial diversions or worldly authority, but rather for profound quietude and spiritual impeccability. Within the surviving remnants of their teachings and aphorisms, a fascinating resonance persists, subtle allusions suggesting that certain profound enigmas are best preserved in the realm of the unarticulated. These early Christian ascetics were inheritors of an ancient lineage of spiritual practice, one that conceivably extended back to the very period of Jesus' unrecorded early life. They held a profound conviction that the austere desert environment possessed an inherent capacity to divest the human spirit of all superficiality, effectively dismantling deceptive appearances and laying bare fundamental truths. This wilderness, in their understanding, served as a crucible for intense personal trials and seductive temptations, yet simultaneously functioned as a profound arena for divine enlightenment. For these contemplative figures, quietude was not perceived as a void or an absence, but rather as a profound plenitude, an expansive inner sanctuary where the sacred presence of the divine could be apprehended directly, unhindered by the often distracting mediation of spoken language. The narratives they transmitted were not structured like the meticulously crafted Gospels, but rather resembled hushed intimations, obscure, fragmented, and deliberately elusive in their meaning. Within the rich tapestry of this spiritual lineage, certain hermits and monastic figures alluded indistinctly to the concealed period of Jesus' early adulthood. They refrained from explicitly recounting specific anecdotes, instead offering veiled suggestions of profound truths and spiritual secrets deemed either too perilous, too sacred, or too susceptible to misinterpretation for direct articulation. In their deliberate reticence, one discerns a powerful mirroring of the Gospel's own lacunae, an underlying conviction that the most essential aspects of spiritual reality were not meant for verbal exposition, but rather for profound experiential embodiment. A particular aphorism frequently credited to the Desert Fathers states with stark simplicity, "If you have words, you are not yet silent. If you are not silent, you do not yet see." This profound declaration prompts a compelling question. Might this serve as their interpretive framework for understanding the absent narratives of Jesus' formative years? It suggests that the profound essence of his spiritual readiness and maturation resided precisely within the embrace of silence itself, within the rigorous practice of anonymity, and in the gradual refinement of a soul exquisitely attuned to the divine will. Consider the evocative image of a youthful Jesus venturing into the untamed wilderness, a common practice for prophetic figures throughout history. There, the relentless passage of days extends into weeks, under the scorching glare of the midday sun and the penetrating brilliance of the nocturnal stars. He sustains himself by drawing water from infrequent natural springs and partaking of the minimal sustenance the arid landscape offers. More significantly, he engages in profound auditory contemplation, attending to the whispering breeze sweeping across ancient stones, to the resonant inner promptings of his own spirit, and to the profound stillness that imparts wisdom without the need for spoken instruction. This scenario, while not verifiable historical fact, resonates with a spiritual cadence that the Desert Fathers would have instantly comprehended. They, too, firmly held the conviction that profound quietude possessed the transformative power to sculpt and refine the human spirit. Many centuries subsequently, as these dedicated ascetics sought refuge in the desert's isolation, they might have been, whether intentionally or instinctively, echoing the very blueprint of those unrecorded years of Jesus. Their austere existences served as living allegories of profound retreat and eventual spiritual reemergence, of deliberate obscurity preceding profound insight. While they bequeathed no written histories detailing Jesus' early life, their manner of living strongly implied an intimate understanding of such truths. Indeed, certain profound realities are not committed to written record precisely because they resist such documentation. Their essence can only be apprehended and experienced within the profound depths of silence. For those engaging with this narrative, this contemplation offers a subtle yet potent insight. The enigmatic period of Jesus' missing years might be understood less through the lens of external circumstances, such as his geographical travels or academic pursuits, and more as a journey of profound inner transformation. It invites consideration of how profound quietude might have meticulously prepared him, and how a life of intentional obscurity might have refined his spiritual essence. The enduring legacy of the Desert Fathers serves as a compelling reminder that the most profound spiritual enigmas frequently transcend linguistic expression, and that occasionally what remains unarticulated carries a far greater potency than any explicit declaration. Envision a solitary desert grotto as twilight descends. Within its muted confines, a venerable monk sits in a cross-legged posture, bathed in the fading light. He utters no sound, his attention fixed solely upon the rhythmic pulse of his own heart. Beyond the cave's mouth, the wind whispers across the undulating sand dunes, bearing with it the very same profound quietude that once enveloped Jesus' unchronicled early adulthood. This pervasive stillness is not merely a void. It constitutes a palpable presence, a veiled spiritual reality that surpasses the limitations of language and the constraints of historical documentation. It is plausible that the Desert Fathers deliberately refrained from articulating explicit details about these missing years because they perceived them not as an intellectual enigma demanding resolution, but rather as a profound paradigm for spiritual emulation. To inhabit a life of silence is to willingly embrace the enigmatic. To relinquish the need for verbal expression is to step directly into the heart of truth. In this profound manner, the deliberate reticence within the gospel narratives and the pervasive quietude of the desert converge, resonating as a singular, unified refrain. That which remains concealed may indeed possess a sanctity surpassing that which is openly disclosed. For a span approaching 2 millennia, the unrecorded period of Jesus' life has persistently captivated and challenged the intellectual faculties of academics and researchers. Historians, theological experts, and spiritual aspirants have meticulously examined the disparate fragments of available evidence, driven by the aspiration to synthesize them into a unified and intelligible narrative. However, this enduring enigma stubbornly defies a definitive resolution. The constituent elements of this historical puzzle do exist, dispersed across various non-canonical gospels, ancient medieval tales, enduring oral lore, and subtle archaeological suggestions. Yet, despite concerted efforts by scholars to meticulously assemble these pieces, the complete picture consistently fails to coalesce into a clear and comprehensive form. Certain academics underscore the profound historical lacuna, contending that the very dearth of corroborating evidence functions as an implicit testament to Jesus' probable quiet existence in Nazareth, where he pursued the trade of a carpenter, largely unnoticed until his public baptism by John the Baptist. From this perspective, the years unaccounted for are devoid of any inherent mystique, instead representing a commonplace period, their silence merely signifying a life too unremarkable for historical chronicling. For these particular scholars, to hypothesize extensive journeys to distant lands, such as India, Britain, or further afield, is to engage in unfounded mythological speculation. The resolution to this purported puzzle, they assert, is simply that no genuine enigma exists. Conversely, other researchers highlight specific indicators that challenge such straightforward interpretations. They observe the striking immediacy of Jesus' pedagogical authority, the widespread applicability of his allegorical teachings, and the profound affinity between his pronouncements and wisdom traditions originating far beyond the confines of Judea. These scholars propose that such intellectual and spiritual profundity is unlikely to have developed in complete isolation, suggesting instead that it must reflect an engagement with more expansive intellectual and spiritual movements. In this interpretive framework, the unrecorded years transform into an alluring conceptual space upon which to project a multitude of possibilities, perhaps rigorous training within sane communities, immersion in ancient Egyptian esoteric traditions, exposure to profound Indian philosophical systems, or even participation in the vibrant multicultural exchanges facilitated by the Silk Road. Yet another group of scholars opts for a balanced, intermediate position. They put forth the idea that Jesus would not have required extensive travels to engage with the broader intellectual and spiritual currents of the world. Galilee itself, strategically positioned along significant ancient trade routes, naturally exposed its inhabitants to diverse foreign perspectives and innovative concepts. A young man endowed with keen observational skills and attentive listening could, hypothetically, have assimilated a rich tapestry of global diversity without ever needing to depart from his native region. According to this viewpoint, the historical enigma finds its resolution not through hypothetical distant expeditions, but through a profound, localized immersion within a vibrant nexus of converging cultures. Furthermore, there exist those who contend that the historical silence is entirely intentional, positing that the canonical Gospels actively obscure more information than they disclose. They hypothesize that early ecclesiastical authorities might have possessed knowledge of narratives pertaining to Jesus' formative years, but deliberately elected against their preservation, apprehensive of potential theological confusion or disruptive controversies. For these particular scholars, the crux of the enigma resides not in a mere absence of information, but rather in a calculated act of suppression, a meticulously concealed historical account. Each of these diverse perspectives garners its own proponents and possesses its own inherent validity. Nevertheless, none can assert definitive closure on the matter, as the available evidence remains exceedingly sparse and frequently contradictory. Consequently, the perplexing question persists without a definitive answer, quite possibly defying any ultimate resolution. Perhaps this very inscrutability constitutes its most authentic nature, not a challenge intended for a definitive conclusion, but rather a profound enigma destined for ongoing, reflective contemplation. Envision a dedicated academic laboring at his workspace in the late hours of the evening, enveloped by towering stacks of tomes and ancient handwritten scrolls. The flickering flames of candles cast long shadows as the delicate parchment rustles softly beneath his probing fingertips. He meticulously correlates disparate textual fragments, contrasts various linguistic renditions, and diligently records similarities between the pronouncements attributed to Jesus and the wisdom articulated by venerable philosophers from distant cultures. His intellect strains relentlessly in an attempt to harmonize these disparate elements, yet the cohesive narrative continually eludes his grasp. The profound quietude residing within the interstices of these fragments resonates with a greater intensity than the fragments themselves. For those absorbing this account, the intellectual arduousness experienced by such scholars forms an integral component of the overarching narrative itself. It powerfully illustrates the enduring nature of enigma, even when subjected to the most intense scrutiny of rational inquiry. The enduring riddle of Jesus' unrecorded years has consistently rebuffed every concerted effort to unravel it, serving as a poignant reminder that historical understanding is not a precise mathematical equation, and that spiritual conviction cannot be compressed into a mere chronological sequence of events. The lacunae within the historical record persist, unyielding, profoundly quiet, and steadfast. Perhaps this very persistence is the central lesson. This particular enigma does not demand a definitive resolution, but rather an acceptance of its continued presence. An acknowledgement that certain information may perpetually elude discovery, and a recognition that the very act of silence imparts a profound lesson in humility. The intellectual challenge faced by these scholars thus transforms, not into a portal leading to irrefutable certainty, but rather into a potent testament to the boundaries of human comprehension. Indeed, certain epochs of history are inscribed not with conventional ink, but with the indelible substance of profound mystery. Imagine those disparate historical fragments spread across a surface. They stubbornly refuse to interlock perfectly, irrespective of how meticulously they are arranged. Nevertheless, in their collective presence, they intimate a reality far more expansive than their individual components. They subtly convey the essence of a narrative transcending mere linguistic expression, of formative years that, despite their concealment, possess immense potency, and of a pervasive quietude that continues to resonate with profound meaning. To entertain the notion that Jesus might have journeyed beyond the geographical confines of Judea, potentially acquiring knowledge from non-Jewish spiritual masters, or assimilating insights from diverse cultural traditions, is to approach a doctrinal frontier that numerous ecclesiastical authorities have assiduously protected for extended periods. Prevailing Orthodox theology unequivocally asserts the singular and unparalleled nature of Christ, maintaining that his teachings originated exclusively from direct divine disclosure, rather than through the syncretic fusion of various cultural influences. To concede any formative impact from ancient Egypt, distant India, or the Persian Empire would be to imply that his inherent authority was not entirely celestial, but rather partially human, having been shaped by personal interactions, informed by the instruction of mentors, and molded by the very earthly realm he purportedly arrived to spiritually reclaim. Throughout many centuries, such propositions were regarded with profound skepticism and distrust. The ecclesiastical councils responsible for establishing the biblical canon placed paramount importance on doctrinal coherence and unblemished theological integrity, striving diligently to safeguard the nascent faith from potential error or doctrinal deviation. Jesus, in their definitive understanding, was to be revered solely as the divine Son of God, not as an itinerant spiritual explorer who methodically assembled disparate fragments of wisdom from various global traditions. To advocate for an alternative interpretation was to imperil the very structural integrity of established Christian dogma and potentially unravel the tightly woven fabric of widely accepted belief. The deliberate reticence embedded within the gospel accounts consequently proved highly advantageous to the maintenance of orthodox doctrine. By intentionally leaving these formative years unaddressed, the narrative successfully preserved a sense of profound spiritual mystery, without inadvertently provoking inquiries that might lead to schismatic divisions within the faith. Nevertheless, subtle indications of a more complex reality persisted. The non-canonical Gospels, the ancient narratives concerning Isa, Jesus in Islamic tradition, and the hushed rumors of concealed manuscript discoveries, all served to gently pull back this protective veil, hinting that perhaps the unrecorded years encompassed more than mere sacred anonymity. Academics who ventured to investigate such unconventional possibilities frequently faced accusations of heresy, their scholarly contributions denounced, and their dissenting perspectives systematically suppressed. Orthodox religious authority demanded unequivocal certainty. Speculative inquiry was deemed an unacceptable and perilous undertaking. Speculation was too dangerous. Even in contemporary times, the notion that the profound teachings of Jesus Christ might somehow incorporate or reflect various Eastern philosophies creates considerable disquiet among numerous adherents. For some, drawing comparisons between his sacred pronouncements and the boundless compassion espoused by Buddhism, or the encompassing unity celebrated in Hinduism, is perceived as an act that diminishes his unique divine essence. Nevertheless, for a different segment of the faithful, such intriguing parallels serve to deepen the profound mystery surrounding his person, rather than in any way weakening its compelling allure. These individuals suggest that the very nature of divine truth might transcend the confines of any single religious tradition, implying that Christ's profound wisdom could resonate so powerfully precisely because it harmonized with fundamental truths already murmured and acknowledged in a multitude of languages and cultures across the ancient world. This persistent tension, oscillating between the steadfast adherence to established orthodoxy and an eager embrace of intellectual and spiritual openness, fundamentally shapes and defines a significant portion of the ongoing discourse surrounding Jesus' enigmatic lost years. For those who consider themselves the vigilant guardians of religious tradition, the profound silence enveloping these years must remain inviolate, a sacred mystery impervious to any form of external inquiry or intrusive speculation. Conversely, For spiritual seekers and mystics, this very silence is perceived not as an absence, but as an explicit invitation, a door deliberately left ajar, beckoning them towards profound exploration and deeper understanding. Each distinct perspective harbors a genuine apprehension regarding the potential consequences of the other. One group fears the potential fragmentation and dissolution of cherished faith, while the other deeply concerns itself with the spiritual stagnation and loss of wonder that might result from an unyielding resistance to inquiry. One might vividly imagine an early ecclesiastical council of revered bishops, gathered within dimly lit, candlelit halls, engaged in a fervent debate regarding which sacred narratives ought to be meticulously preserved for posterity. Upon a venerable table rests a fragile scroll, allegedly detailing Jesus' period of study in distant foreign lands. Certain influential voices earnestly advocate for its inclusion, emphasizing how such a narrative would depict a Christ actively engaged with the broader world and its diverse wisdom. Others, however, gravely shake their heads, issuing solemn warnings that such unconventional tales could potentially bewilder and confuse the faithful, subtly suggesting that the path to salvation might not be exclusively and purely divine. Ultimately, after much deliberation, the controversial scroll is carefully set aside, condemned to slowly fade into the annals of unspoken history and forgotten lore. In this instance, orthodoxy prevails, not through the provision of definitive answers, but rather by the strategic suppression and deliberate silencing of challenging questions. And yet, despite such efforts, the profound questions stubbornly persist. They resurface with an enduring vitality in every successive generation, manifesting in the courageous inquiries of every scholar who dares to ask, and in the quiet introspection of every individual who perceives subtle echoes of Eastern wisdom within the familiar words spoken in Galilee. While orthodoxy may diligently guard the sacred silence, it possesses no power to eradicate this deep-seated longing for understanding. The lost years thus remain a quiet, yet persistent challenge, continuously pressing against the established boundaries of theological certainty. This inherent tension between what is known and what is yearned for is an intrinsic part of the mystery's enduring allure. Faith and doubt, sacred tradition and imaginative speculation, diligent preservation and intrepid exploration. All these fundamental elements converge and intertwine within the profound silence of those pivotal 18 years. The profound challenge to established orthodoxy extends beyond mere historical inquiry. It fundamentally concerns the manner in which humanity confronts the vast unknown. Do we choose to hermetically seal the door, thereby meticulously preserving the mystery in its pristine state? Or do we courageously open it, accepting the inherent risk of being profoundly transformed by what we might discover? As the night deepens and shadows lengthen, one can once again envision that profound silence, not as an empty void, but rather as a space charged with an almost palpable energy, humming with persistent questions that steadfastly refuse to be silenced. Orthodoxy has strenuously endeavored to hold this silence fixed and immutable, yet like the very wind itself, it ceaselessly continues to move, to whisper tantalizing possibilities, and to extend an irresistible invitation. Perhaps the true challenge lies not in the act of breaking faith, but rather in cultivating an environment where both faith and mystery can coexist and breathe together in harmonious equilibrium. When the profound silence surrounding Jesus' lost years is reinterpreted not merely as an absence of information, but rather as a period of intense personal formation, a novel and compelling picture begins to emerge. That these hidden years may have constituted a sophisticated long-term curriculum, a quiet and extensive education meticulously preparing him for the monumental mission that lay ahead. This was not an education confined solely to ancient scrolls and traditional classrooms, but rather one encompassing the deeper, more profound lessons gleaned from life itself, lessons imparted by diverse people, varied landscapes, and the quiet, inexorable passage of time. Some ancient traditions vividly imagine him learning invaluable wisdom from revered sages, profound mystics, and venerable priests in distant, exotic lands. Other traditions, however, envision him deeply rooted in his native Nazareth, profoundly shaped by the predictable rhythms of family life and the demands of daily labor. In either interpretive framework, the lost years transform into a veritable school of hidden wisdom, a period where the future teacher of eternity was, himself, a diligent student. His later parables, characterized by their striking simplicity and profound depth, carry the undeniable weight of lived experience, as though every vivid image had been thoroughly absorbed and contemplated in profound silence long before it was ever articulated aloud. One might consider the remarkable frequency with which his profound words draw inspiration directly from the natural world. The soaring birds of the air, the delicate lilies of the field, the humble mustard seed that ultimately blossoms into a sheltering haven for countless creatures. Such poignant images are not acquired from the dusty pages of scrolls. They are meticulously gathered from countless hours of patient observation, of mindful noticing. The hidden years, therefore, may have been replete with such profound attention to detail, a rigorous training in perceiving the divine essence within the seemingly ordinary. Furthermore, there exists the hidden curriculum of diligent work. Carpentry, for instance, demands an exceptional degree of patience, unwavering precision, and robust endurance. It imparts invaluable lessons regarding the inherent strength of various materials, the critical importance of steady, skilled hands, and the absolute necessity of constructing foundations that are designed to last. Later, when Jesus eloquently spoke of yokes made easy or houses built upon unyielding rock, perhaps he was not merely reaching for abstract metaphor, but rather drawing directly from deeply etched, lived memories. His profound spiritual authority was undeniably shaped, in part, by the rigorous discipline of physical labor. And then there is the inescapable curriculum of suffering. Life in ancient Galilee was certainly not devoid of significant hardship. Pervasive poverty, the oppressive weight of Roman occupation, and widespread social unrest pressed heavily upon the fabric of daily existence. If Jesus lived quietly among his people during these years, he would undoubtedly have witnessed profound injustice firsthand, personally felt the crushing struggles of the poor, and shared intimately in the myriad burdens of ordinary existence. Later, when he powerfully proclaimed good news for the impoverished, freedom for the oppressed, and solace for the weary, his words carried not merely abstract theological theory, but rather the undeniable resonance of lived, empathetic compassion. To contemplate the lost years in this manner is to perceive them not as blank, empty pages, but as a period of profound, hidden preparation. The very silence itself becomes an integral part of the lesson. that true wisdom is not always imparted through grand spectacle or overt display, but often through the quiet virtues of patience, diligent labor, and profound attention. This hidden curriculum meticulously formed not only the specific content of his words, but also his fundamental way of being. A presence deeply grounded, profoundly compassionate, and exquisitely attuned to both the tangible earth and the boundless eternal. Imagine him seated at the edge of a sun-drenched field, intently observing a farmer meticulously scattering seeds. Imagine him carefully repairing a broken yoke, his hands steady and adept, his mind completely attentive to the task at hand. Imagine him quietly listening to the profound grief of his neighbors, to the unrestrained laughter of children at play, to the earnest debates of elders within the synagogue. These fleeting moments may never have been formally documented or written down, yet they undeniably became an indelible part of his very being. They profoundly shaped the voice that would one day summon disciples, and the compassionate heart that would one day embrace and transform an entire world. This particular notion carries with it a gentle yet profound truth. Our own often hidden years, seasons characterized by waiting, by obscurity, by the performance of ordinary, unnoticed work, may also constitute a vital part of a curriculum that remains largely unseen. The periods of silence in our lives may not be empty voids, but rather profoundly formative experiences, shaping us in ways that we are not yet capable of perceiving. The missing years of Jesus serve as a poignant reminder that the most profound and significant preparations often unfold unnoticed, hidden in plain sight, patiently awaiting their divinely appointed time. Picture the humble workshop, the sun-drenched hillside, the bustling market. None of these scenes appear extraordinary on the surface. Yet within these seemingly ordinary days, a hidden curriculum quietly unfolds, meticulously weaving together threads of patience, compassion, and profound wisdom. When Jesus finally stepped into public life, he carried within him the invaluable lessons gleaned from silence, the robust strength forged through diligent labor, and the expansive vision born of observing the world with unguarded, discerning eyes. The missing years, therefore, may be less of an inscrutable riddle and more of a powerful reminder that even silence itself can be a profound teacher, and that hidden seasons of preparation can equip us for truths far greater than we could ever possibly imagine. The profound silence surrounding Jesus' lost years has consistently provided fertile ground for the human imagination. And within that expansive conceptual space, civilizations far beyond the geographical confines of Judea have claimed to perceive echoes of his enigmatic presence. In India, venerable oral traditions speak of a revered holy man originating from the West, affectionately remembered as Isa, who purportedly studied among wise sages before ultimately returning to his ancestral homeland. In Persia, tantalizing fragments of ancient lore suggest a mysterious traveler whose teachings resonated deeply with the Zoroastrian dualities of light and darkness. Even in Britain, medieval legends recount tales of a young Jesus embarking on a journey with Joseph of Arimathea, supposedly gracing the verdant hills of Glastonbury with his presence. To contemporary ears, such narratives may indeed sound whimsical or purely fanciful, yet they unveil a deeper, more fundamental truth, a universal human longing to intricately connect the life of Jesus with the rich spiritual heritage of numerous lands. Each distinct civilization, upon hearing his voice reverberate across the vast expanse of time, imaginatively speculates that perhaps he once traversed their very soil, that their unique wisdom played a significant role in shaping his transformative path. The profound silence of those intervening years acts like an expansive, resonant chamber, amplifying the captivating possibility of shared spiritual roots and interconnectedness. When his later, universally recognized teachings are meticulously compared to the profound wisdom embedded in other spiritual traditions, striking parallels undeniably emerge. His pronouncements regarding humility, for instance, strongly echo Buddhist exhortations to relinquish the ego and let go of the self. His divine command to love one's neighbor resonates deeply with Confucian ideals emphasizing societal harmony and mutual respect. His vivid imagery of the divine presence residing within each individual mirrors ancient Hindu teachings concerning the eternal indwelling soul. Were these remarkable similarities the result of direct historical contact? Or did such profound truths arise independently across diverse civilizations? The persistent silence offers no definitive answer, only the tantalizing yet unconfirmed possibility of a profound connection. What remains unequivocally clear is that Jesus' overarching message possessed an inherent universality, which allowed it to be comprehended and embraced in a multitude of languages, across myriad cultures, and throughout various historical epochs. Perhaps this inherent universality is precisely why echoes of his transformative presence appear across such diverse civilizations, not necessarily because he physically traveled to all these distant locales, but rather because his words harmonized exquisitely with wisdom already present within those cultures. Much like a specific chord struck on one string of an instrument can cause another, sympathetically tuned string to vibrate in resonance. His profound voice effectively set ancient, universal truths resonating wherever they were discovered. Yet there exists another compelling possibility, that these subtle echoes are more than mere coincidence, that history itself may preserve faint, almost imperceptible traces of encounters that we are currently unable to definitively prove. Ancient caravans traversed vast continents. Merchants not only transported valuable goods, but also carried and disseminated compelling stories, and earnest seekers of profound wisdom frequently journeyed far and wide in their relentless quest for ultimate truth. In such a vibrant and interconnected ancient world, it is not entirely inconceivable that the young Jesus might have traveled much farther than the canonical Gospels explicitly acknowledge, leaving behind subtle whispers that gradually evolved into enduring legend. Imagine him embarking on a long, arduous road, with dust swirling gently beneath his feet, majestic mountains looming grandly in the distant horizon, and the unfamiliar sounds of foreign tongues spoken all around him. A revered teacher pauses along his path to greet him, offering a profound word of insight, a captivating parable, or a visionary perspective. The young seeker listens intently, internalizes the wisdom, carries it with him, and then continues on his journey. Later, in another distant land, those who encountered him remember not his specific name, but rather his compelling presence, his thoughtful questions, and his quiet, yet undeniable authority. Over the course of many centuries, initial memory slowly transmutes into legend, and legend, in turn, subtly transforms into an enduring echo. Narratives often transmute into legendary accounts, and these legends, in turn, dissipate into mere reverberations. These resonating echoes form an integral part of the enigma's profound melody. They serve to impress upon observers that fundamental truths are not constrained by geographical boundaries, that universal sagacity articulates itself across diverse cultural landscapes, and that profound silence possesses the capacity to convey substance as effectively as absence. The definitive certainty of whether Jesus genuinely traversed the ancient territories of India, Persia, or even Britain may forever elude human comprehension. Yet the pervasive echoes reverberating throughout various civilizations strongly intimate that his existence cannot be geographically confined to a singular dominion. His compelling narrative, much like the essence of his transformative message, unequivocally belongs to the entirety of the global populace. One might endeavor to visualize the intricate tapestry of the ancient world's geographical expanse. Intricate networks of commercial exchange and spiritual pilgrimages intricately intersected vast deserts, expansive seas, and formidable mountain ranges. Along these well-worn pathways, countless utterances journeyed, some emanating from human voices, others perceived as divine pronouncements. Amidst this historical movement, it is conceivable that a youthful individual walked, whose physical footsteps left no discernible historical record, yet whose profound reverberations persist to this very day, carried across the breadth of human civilizations, akin to an ethereal whisper traversing the corridors of time. What profound insights do the unrecorded intervals of Jesus' early life impart to humanity, if not the profound instruction inherent in obscurity itself? For an approximate span of 2 decades within his earthly existence, the historical documentation remains conspicuously silent. There are no reported prodigious acts, no meticulously transcribed sermons, and no detailed chronicles of journeys undertaken. Merely an expansive silence stretches across these 18 years, akin to a secluded, verdant valley nestled between 2 towering, visibly prominent peaks. And yet, it is perhaps within this very state of being unnoticed and unchronicled that the most enduring and profound wisdom can be discovered. Genuine greatness frequently germinates and flourishes entirely unobserved. Seeds diligently extend their root systems deep into the fertile earth long before their tender shoots manage to pierce the surface and greet the daylight. Mighty rivers meticulously sculpt unseen subterranean channels beneath the earth's crust before their waters spectacularly erupt into public view. In a similar fashion, the formative years of Jesus' life might have unfolded, a period of concealed development meticulously preparing the groundwork for a sudden transformative revelation. The canonical Gospels abruptly transition from depicting him as a child to portraying him as a fully grown man, from his presence in the temple to his baptism, thereby leaving countless individuals to ponder what transpired in the quiet interlude. The resolution to this query might be remarkably straightforward. He was simply living, patiently awaiting his destined moment, undergoing a profound internal deepening, all while remaining unseen by the wider world. Obscurity, far from denoting emptiness, represents a gradual and deliberate accumulation of inner strength, the meticulous and patient refinement of one's character, and a quiet, profound absorption of the surrounding world. Within the crucible of obscurity, a soul assiduously cultivates resilience, profound humility, and boundless compassion. These are invaluable life lessons that cannot be hastily acquired or publicly demonstrated, but rather are exclusively internalized during the unobserved hours of an ordinary, unassuming existence. When Jesus ultimately stepped into the waters of the Jordan River, he bore with him not merely the impending revelation of his divine purpose, but also the rich harvest gleaned from years spent in profound silence and contemplation. Even the hidden periods within our own lives, those extended stretches when nothing particularly noteworthy appears to transpire, may in fact constitute vital seasons of meticulous preparation. These periods of obscurity are by no means squandered. Rather, they are subtly shaping individuals in profound, yet often imperceptible ways. When the definitive moment of a personal calling eventually manifests, individuals too may discover that these unremarked years have providentially equipped them with precisely what is required. The very obscurity surrounding Jesus' youth likewise eloquently testifies to the inherent humility of the divine. If the Son of God truly resided in such profound silence and anonymity for nearly 2 decades, then the state of obscurity itself is thereby elevated and sanctified. To remain unnoticed is therefore not a mark of failure, nor is it a source of ignominy to exist in a hidden state. The ordinary aspects of life thus become imbued with a sacred quality. That which remains unrecorded achieves a precious significance. A divine being who consciously embraced obscurity also chose by that very act to affirm the intrinsic worth and dignity of every single life lived beyond the illuminating glare of history's discerning spotlight. One might once again envision the humble village of Nazareth, its tranquil, unpaved thoroughfares, its unassuming dwellings, its agricultural fields, and its bustling workshops. One might imagine a young man traversing these paths day after day, diligently engaging in labor, attentively listening, and continuously acquiring knowledge. No chronicler recorded his utterances. No historian meticulously documented his daily experiences. Yet, within the profound embrace of that very obscurity, the world's most enduring and impactful voice was being meticulously prepared for its future manifestation. This introspective contemplation extends an invitation to a state of profound repose. Should one's life feel veiled, should one's daily existence appear unremarkable, it is crucial to recall that obscurity is not synonymous with absence. Instead, it functions as a rigorous classroom for cultivating patience, a transformative crucible for forging inner strength, and a concealed wellspring of profound wisdom. The silence that pervades the Gospels concerning these years may be interpreted less as a narrative void and more as a profound benefaction, serving to remind all that obscurity possesses its own unique and quiet sanctity. One should contemplate these hidden years not as an intricate enigma demanding resolution, but rather as a profound lesson awaiting reception. The fundamental instruction imparted is that true greatness often blossoms in silence, that the seemingly unnoticed aspects of existence hold significant import, that the most potent and influential lives are frequently forged and refined in obscurity, and that occasionally, the very chapters that are absent from a narrative are those that most profoundly shape its overarching trajectory. The silence surrounding Jesus' unrecorded years accomplishes far more than merely stimulating intellectual curiosity. It fundamentally redefines how faith itself is comprehended. For adherents, the Gospels are not simply factual chronicles, but rather sacred testimonies meticulously designed to unveil truths that transcend mere historical documentation. Nevertheless, the conspicuous 18-year lacuna serves as a potent reminder that faith is not constructed upon an exhaustive compendium of minute details, but rather upon an unwavering trust in that which has been divinely ordained to endure. This very absence, in its essence, constitutes a test of faith, inquiring whether individuals possess the capacity to accept profound mystery as an intrinsic component of the sacred narrative. If Jesus indeed journeyed to distant lands, assiduously assimilating wisdom from diverse spiritual traditions, then faith undergoes an expansive transformation, enabling it to perceive God's intricate work interwoven through a multiplicity of cultures, rather than being narrowly confined to a single one. The divine message, in such a perspective, ceases to be a singular, isolated note, evolving instead into a rich, resonant harmony, reverberating across the vast expanse of civilizations. Such an expansive viewpoint has the potential to deepen profound reverence, unequivocally demonstrating that God's truth is not restricted, but inherently universal. Yet simultaneously, it also engenders a certain disquietude, for it inevitably blurs the distinct boundaries that established traditions have rigorously maintained for extended periods. If, conversely, Jesus lived a quiet, unassuming existence in Nazareth, shrouded in obscurity, then faith is challenged in an entirely different manner. It demands a belief that the Son of God resided for decades as an ordinary human being, unnoticed and uncelebrated by the world. It posits that divinity can indeed inhabit the mundane, and that holiness can assume the guise of an ordinary, everyday life. This particular vision profoundly sanctifies the commonplace, serving to remind believers that the sacred is discovered not solely in miraculous occurrences, but equally in moments of silence, diligent labor, and patient endurance. And if the missing years were, in fact, deliberately suppressed or concealed, faith then confronts an even sharper and more unsettling inquiry. Can the Church, with all its human decisions, omissions, and silences, still be reliably trusted to faithfully transmit the truth? For some individuals, this very possibility irrevocably erodes their foundational confidence. For others, however, it serves to sharpen their conviction, imparting the profound lesson that the quintessential essence of the divine message cannot be wholly contained or controlled by any human institution, but rather persists and thrives even in the face of deliberate suppression. Each of these possibilities inherently carries its own unique implications, its own distinct reshaping of the landscape of faith. To embrace these various interpretations is not tantamount to abandoning one's core beliefs, but rather to permit belief itself to become more pliant, more expansive in its scope, and more receptive to the profound unknown. Faith, in this evolution, becomes less about absolute certainty and more about profound trust, less about intellectual possession and more about reverent wonder. These contemplative reflections extend an invitation to cultivate a quiet, receptive openness. Faith need not harbor apprehension concerning the silence of the unrecorded years. It can, instead, embrace the inherent mystery as an intrinsic component of its very fabric, serving as a potent reminder that truth is of a magnitude far greater than mere words, and far more expansive than historical record alone. Faith sustains itself not by meticulously resolving every intricate riddle, but by courageously advancing forward, even when the path ahead appears dimly lit and uncertain. One might visualize a lantern being carried through the profound darkness of night. Its luminous glow does not utterly banish the encroaching shadows, but it steadfastly illuminates the pathway, step by careful step. In an analogous manner, faith navigates through the profound realm of mystery. The unrecorded years may forever remain unseen, yet the illuminating light of their profound implications continues to provide guidance. Whether they conceal epic journeys or profound silence, deliberate suppression or humble obscurity, they consistently remind observers that the comprehensive narrative of Jesus is not solely concluded on ancient parchment. It is, rather, brought to its ultimate fruition within the very heart of faith, where mystery itself is transformed into something profoundly sacred. One should allow that inner lantern to radiate its gentle glow from within. It does not provide an explanation for the pervasive silence, but it renders that silence endurable. It serves to remind individuals that faith is not a state of absolute certainty, but rather an unwavering trust in that which endures, even when the historical record remains incomplete. At the culmination of all intensive inquiry, of all intellectual speculation, and of all meticulous tracing of ancient legends and sacred texts, one singular element undeniably persists: silence. The unrecorded years of Jesus remain lost to historical documentation, and perhaps they will forever remain so. The canonical Gospels conspicuously leave these years blank. Scholars engage in endless, fervent debates concerning them. Storytellers intricately weave them into elaborate narratives of adventurous travel and profound wonder. But the absolute truth, if such a truth could ever be definitively inscribed upon a page, remains perpetually unspoken. This pervasive silence is not, however, an empty void. It has, over centuries, powerfully captivated the human imagination, drawing pilgrims, mystics, historians, and dreamers alike into its compelling orbit. The missing years serve as a poignant reminder that history is never truly complete, and that profoundly sacred lives cannot be fully contained or circumscribed by mere parchment alone. That which remains unspoken is frequently as potent and influential as that which is explicitly declared. The very absence itself becomes an intrinsic part of the overarching narrative, profoundly shaping how individuals listen, how they wonder, and ultimately, how they believe. In this nuanced manner, the unrecorded years function less as a mere historical gap and more as a reflective mirror. Each successive generation projects into this silence that which it most deeply yearns for. A universal teacher bridging the philosophical divides between East and West. A humble laborer sanctifying the dignity of obscurity, or a hidden mystic meticulously guarded by profound secrecy. The silence itself gracefully bends to accommodate the contours of human questions, reflecting back not definitive certainty, but rather a profound and persistent yearning. And yet, there resides a gentle and profound wisdom in allowing this silence to remain unbroken. For if every minute detail were known, if every single year were meticulously recorded, the profound mystery would inevitably dissipate. The unrecorded years instruct humanity in the art of living with unknowing, to embrace faith not as a static possession of facts, but as an active, dynamic trust. They serve to remind all that even within the apparent gaps, profound meaning steadfastly abides. One might imagine closing a book only to discover that its most pivotal chapter is missing. Initially, one might feel a sense of disquietude, but then a realization dawns that the very absence of that chapter fundamentally alters how the entire narrative is perceived. One lingers over the words that remain. One diligently searches the silences interspersed between them. One allows their imagination to roam freely. The absence itself has become an integral component of the story, shaping it profoundly from within. Such is precisely the case with the profound life of Jesus. For the contemplative observer, this concluding thought profoundly lingers. That which remains unspoken may possess a sacred quality as profound as that which is explicitly articulated. The silence surrounding the unrecorded years is not a flaw or an imperfection, but rather an intrinsic feature, serving to remind humanity that truth often conceals itself within shadows, patiently awaiting discovery, yet never being fully grasped in its entirety. The hidden years constitute an eloquent invitation to profound wonder, to diligent seeking, and to a restful immersion in pervasive mystery. One might close their eyes and allow the profound silence to envelop them, not a silence of barren emptiness, but one of immense depth, of palpable presence, and of hidden truths residing just beyond immediate reach. The very atmosphere seemed to thrum with a palpable sense of an underlying presence, a quiet but insistent energy that defied easy categorization. It was a space saturated with the echoes of untold narratives, a repository, perhaps, of profound hidden truths that tantalizingly shimmered on the periphery of perception, forever just beyond the reach of complete articulation or definitive understanding. This pervasive aura suggested a deeper reality, a complex tapestry woven from experiences and insights that remained stubbornly veiled, inviting contemplation without offering immediate revelation. Indeed, it is within the deepest recesses of that profound quietude that observers might intuitively sense the faint, resonant echo of an unspoken saga, a narrative specifically encompassing an entire span of 18 years. Yet this complex chronicle, perhaps, was never truly destined for enunciation or public recounting. Instead, its fundamental purpose might have been to endure as an enigmatic presence, perpetually enshrouded in an alluring veil of mystery. This enduring state of the unknown, far from being a void, would instead serve as a unique navigational force, directing human perception not through the reassuring pathways of definitive certainty, but rather along the captivating, boundless avenues of pure wonder and profound contemplation. The task of rephrasing an existing text, adhering meticulously to guidelines concerning length, structural integrity, linguistic embellishment, and factual precision, is a process demanding careful attention and a comprehensive understanding of the source material. It involves a sophisticated interplay of vocabulary expansion, the skillful deployment of varied grammatical constructions, and the judicious application of expressive literary devices to cultivate a narrative that is both vibrant and captivating, yet remains devoid of redundant phrasing or repetitive concepts. The imperative to preserve proper names, specialized terminology, numerical data, and all factual assertions without alteration ensures the informational bedrock of the original remains steadfast and uncompromised. Furthermore, maintaining a consistent tonal quality, whether it be a serious, informal, or technical register, alongside a journalistic narrative style and a strictly third-person perspective, is crucial for an authentic and seamless transformation. The ultimate objective is always to ensure the core message and the underlying purpose of the original composition are conveyed with unequivocal clarity and precision in the newly articulated version. However, in this instance, the specific text designated for such a comprehensive and detailed reinterpretation has not been provided. To undertake the requested paraphrase, with its intricate requirements for expansion, stylistic enrichment, and the preservation of specific elements. The original content is an indispensable prerequisite. Therefore, it is necessary for the text intended for this elaborate paraphrasing exercise to be presented, allowing for a diligent and accurate application of all the aforementioned instructions.